There is a single sentence in The Lord of the Rings that has frightened readers for 70 years. It is not a description of Sauron. It is not the Balrog, or the Witch King, or Shelob in her tunnel. It is a sentence spoken almost in passing, spoken by Gandalf, after he has come back from death, trying to explain to his friends where he has been and what he saw in the deep places of the world. And what he says is this: that far under the living earth, in the roots of the mountains, in tunnels that were gnawed out of the stone by things that were not Sauron's servants, there are creatures. Old creatures. Creatures that were there before Sauron. Creatures that Sauron himself does not know about. He calls them Nameless Things. And this is the part that should make the hair on your arms stand up, Gandalf. The wisest being walking the surface of Middle-earth. A Maya who served the gods before the world was shaped. A spirit who has seen the light of Valinor and stood in the presence of powers that could unmake mountains. Gandalf says that he will not describe them. That he will not bring them into the light of day by speaking of them. That some of them, he says, are older than Sauron. Think about what that means. Think about what it actually means. We spend the entire Lord of the Rings learning to be afraid of Sauron. Sauron is the shadow that stretches across the whole story. Sauron is the eye that never closes. Sauron is the maker of the ring, the lord of the Nazgul, the dark power that 3,000 years of history have been organized around resisting. Sauron is the worst thing in the world. And Gandalf is telling us quietly, almost as an aside, that there are things beneath the world that are older than Sauron, that have nothing to do with Sauron, that Sauron does not even know are there. Things that have been gnawing at the foundations of the world since before the Dark Lord we fear was anything at all. Tonight, I want to take you down there, down past the deepest mines the Dwarves ever dug, down past the lowest tunnels of Moria, down past Durin's Bane, past the Balrog, past the place where Gandalf fell, and then further, down to where the Nameless Things live. I want to ask the question that Tolkien refused to answer directly. What are they? Where did they come from? What are they doing down there in the dark? And why did the one being who saw them refuse to speak of them? Because the answer to that last question might be the most frightening part of all. Stay with me. We are going somewhere very deep and very old and very dark. Part 1. The sentence that started everything. Let me give you the moment exactly. Because the power of this whole mystery lives in the specific words, and in who is saying them, and in the strange reluctance with which they are said. It is in the chapter called The White Rider, in the second book of the trilogy. Gandalf has returned. He fell in Moria, fell with the Balrog into the abyss beneath the bridge of Khazad-dûm, fell into darkness that Aragorn and the others assumed was his death. And now he has come back, changed, white instead of grey, and he is sitting with Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli in the forest of Fangorn, and they are asking him the question anyone would ask. What happened to you? Where did you go? And Gandalf tells them. He tells them about the long fall. He tells them about landing in deep water far below the mountains. He tells them about the fight with the Balrog continuing even there, in the dark, in the cold. And then he says the thing. He says that far below the deepest delving of the dwarves, the world is gnawed by nameless things. He says that even Sauron does not know of them. He says that they are older than Sauron. And he says, this is the exact texture of it, that he will not tell his friends about these things, because it would only darken the day. That's it. That's the whole reference. A handful of sentences in a single speech. Tolkien never returns to it. He never explains it. He never names a single one of these creatures, never describes their forms, never tells us what they eat or how they think or whether they think at all. He opens a door at the very bottom of his world, lets us feel the cold air coming up out of it, and then he closes it again and walks away. And this, I want you to understand this. This is not an accident. This is not Tolkien forgetting to finish a thought. This is one of the most deliberate and most sophisticated pieces of horror writing in the entire mythology. Because what Tolkien understood, better than almost any writer who has ever lived, is that the thing you do not describe is infinitely more frightening than the thing you do. He could have told us what the nameless things were. He had the imagination for it. This is the man who invented balrogs and ents, and the whole vast bestiary of Middle-earth. He chose not to. He chose to leave a hole in the bottom of the world. And we have been staring down into that hole for 70 years. Part 2. Why Gandalf's silence matters. Here is the first thing most people miss. The horror of this passage is not really about the creatures. The horror is about Gandalf. Look at who is speaking. Gandalf is not a frightened hobbit. Gandalf is not a superstitious villager telling ghost stories. Gandalf is one of the Maiar, an angelic spirit, a being who existed before the world was made, who participated in the great music from which all of reality was sung into existence. Gandalf has stood against the Witch King of Angmar and not flinched. Gandalf has just finished fighting a Balrog, a demon of the ancient world, a creature of shadow and flame, for days, falling through the deep places of the earth, and he describes that fight almost matter-of-factly. The Balrog he can name. The Balrog he can describe. The Balrog, terrible as it is a known quantity, but the nameless things he will not speak of. And the reason he gives is extraordinary. He does not say they are too horrible to describe. He does not say he lacks the words. He says that to speak of them would darken the day, that bringing them into language, into the light, into the shared world of conversation, would be a kind of contamination, as if the very act of describing them would let something of them up into the world. This is a being who has seen almost everything the world has to offer, and he is treating these creatures the way you might treat a name you are afraid to say out loud. The way ancient peoples treated the names of certain gods, or certain demons, the belief that to speak the name is to call the thing. And notice the other detail, the one that should genuinely disturb you. Gandalf says that Sauron does not know of them. Sauron, the being who has spent thousands of years extending his awareness into every corner of Middle-earth. The being whose eye can feel the ring being used from across the entire continent. The being who corrupted the very fabric of the world with his malice. Even Sauron, with all his ancient power and all his vast attention, does not know that these things exist beneath him. How do you hide from Sauron? How does anything hide from Sauron? The answer is terrifying in its simplicity. You hide from Sauron by being so deep, so old, and so utterly unconcerned with the surface world and everything in it that you never once do anything that would draw his attention. The nameless things are not hiding. They simply do not care. Sauron's entire war, his ring, his armies, his 3,000-year campaign to dominate Middle-earth, to the nameless things, if they are aware of it at all. It is happening very far away, very near the surface, among very small and very temporary creatures. That is the scale we are dealing with. That is the perspective we are about to try to enter. And it is a perspective that makes the entire War of the Ring look like an argument between insects on the skin of something vast and sleeping. Part 3. The geography of Down. To understand the nameless things, you first have to understand where they are. And to understand where they are, you have to understand that Middle-earth goes down much, much further than most people ever stop to imagine. When we think about Middle-earth, we think about the surface, the Shire, Rohan, Gondor, the forests and the mountains and the rivers. We think about Moria maybe as the great underground place, the vast dwarven kingdom hollowed out of the misty mountains, with its endless halls and its bottomless shafts, and its deep, dark dwarf-delved magnificence. But Moria, for all its depth, is shallow. Moria is the top layer. Moria is where the dwarves dug, and the dwarves, mighty as they were, only scratched the upper crust of what lies beneath the mountains. Remember what Gandalf says about his fall. He falls from the bridge of Khazad-dûm, which is already deep in Moria, already far below the surface of the world. And he falls. And he keeps falling. He describes a long fall, down past the lowest places the dwarves ever made, down to a place where there is cold water in the absolute dark, an underground lake or sea, far below even Moria's deepest foundations. And he tells us that this water itself was not the bottom. That below the lowest dungeon, below the deepest delving, the world is still being gnawed by living things. So picture it. Picture the layers. At the top, the green surface where the story happens. Below that, the mines and tunnels of mortal industry. Below that, the great deeps of Moria, the realm of the dwarves. Below that, dark waters that no dwarf ever sailed. And below even that, in tunnels and caverns and spaces that were never made by any hand, that were gnawed and bored and eaten out of the living rock by creatures with no names, there is a whole world. An entire dark ecology, layered beneath the world we know, going down and down toward the roots of the mountains, and perhaps toward the very foundations of Arda itself. And here is the detail that Gandalf gives us that I find most haunting. He says these things gnaw the world. Gnaw it. Not live in it. Not pass through it. They gnaw it. They are actively, constantly, eating their way through the substance of the earth. The tunnels are not natural formations. The tunnels are bite marks. The deep places of the world are not empty caverns. They are wounds, slowly chewed into the body of the world by things that have been chewing since before the Dark Lord had a name. The dwarves dug for treasure. The nameless things dig for what? We do not know. And that not knowing is the whole point. They are doing something down there. They have been doing it for an unimaginably long time. And whatever it is, it has nothing to do with us. Part 4. Older than Sauron. Let me linger on this phrase, because it is doing more work than almost any other phrase in the book. Older than Sauron. To feel the weight of it, you have to understand how old Sauron actually is. And Sauron is old almost beyond reckoning. Sauron was not always the Dark Lord. Before Middle-earth, before the sun and the moon, before the very shaping of the world, Sauron existed as one of the Maiar, the same order of being as Gandalf, the same order as the Balrog. He was among the spirits who entered the world at its beginning. He served all, the great smith of the gods, before he was seduced by the first Dark Lord, Morgoth. And Morgoth, you should understand, makes Sauron look small. Sauron was Morgoth's lieutenant, his servant, his second. So when we say Sauron is old, we mean that Sauron has existed since before the world had a shape. We mean that Sauron watched the first sunrise. We mean that Sauron was ancient when the elves first awoke by the waters of Quivinen, ancient when the first men opened their eyes, ancient beyond any history that any mortal people could record. And the nameless things are older than that. Sit with that for a moment. Whatever these creatures are, they predate one of the primordial spirits of creation. They were already down there, already gnawing, already old, when Sauron was what? A younger spirit? A being not yet fallen? Or were they there before even the Maiar entered the world at all? This is where the mystery starts to open up into something genuinely cosmic. because there are only a few things in Tolkien's entire mythology that could plausibly be older than Sauron. And every single one of those possibilities leads us somewhere strange and dark and wonderful. We are going to walk through each of them. We are going to follow the threads that Tolkien left lying around the edges of his great work, and we are going to see how deep this actually goes. But before we do, I want to plant a flag here, at the beginning, so you do not lose sight of it. Everything I am about to tell you is built on a foundation of deliberate mystery. Tolkien did not want us to know. And the deeper we go, the more we have to ask ourselves a difficult question. Not just what are the nameless things, but why did their maker want them to stay nameless? What was he protecting? Us or the story? Part 5. The first possibility, Spirits of the Discord. The oldest story in all of Tolkien's mythology is the story of the music. And if we want to find something older than Sauron, the music is where we have to begin. Before anything existed, before the world, before the stars, before time as we understand it, there was Eru Ilúvatar, the One, the Creator. And Ilúvatar made the Ainur, the Holy Ones, the first beings, spirits born from his thought. And he taught them to sing. And from their singing, from the great music of the Ainur, the entire world was born, not built, not constructed, but sung into being, harmony by harmony, theme by theme. But the music was not perfect, because one of the Ainur, the greatest of them, the most gifted and the most powerful, named Melkor, who would later be called Morgoth, Melkor began to weave his own thoughts into the music. Thoughts of himself. Thoughts of his own glory. And his theme clashed with the theme of Ilúvatar, and discord entered the music. A second melody, harsh and loud and proud, trying to drown out the original song. 3 times Ilúvatar raised a new theme, and 3 times Melkor's discord rose against it. And here is the thing that matters for our purposes. That discord, that great clashing dissonance that Melkor introduced into the foundational music of creation, it did not simply vanish. The music shaped the world. All of it. Including the parts that were marred, including the parts that came from Melkor's rebellion. So here is the first possibility for what the nameless things might be. When the Ainur entered the world to shape it, many spirits came down with them. Not just the great ones whose names we know, but lesser spirits, countless lesser spirits, who became bound to the world in various forms. Some became the Maiar we know. Some became other things. And it is at least possible, Tolkien leaves the door open, that some spirits entered the world that were aligned not with the harmony of Ilúvatar, but with the discord of Melkor. Spirits of dissonance. Fragments of that original wrongness, given form, bound into the deep places of a world that was sung into being with their discord woven through it. If that is what the nameless things are, then they are not creatures in any biological sense at all. They are embodied wrong notes. They are the parts of the song that should not have been sung, taking shape in the darkness, gnawing at the world, because the world itself, at the deepest level, contains the flaw they came from. They would be older than Sauron because they would be as old as the discord itself, as old as the first moment that something went wrong in the music of creation. And they would gnaw at the world for the simplest and most terrible reason imaginable. Because they are the discord, and the world is the harmony, and the discord can never stop trying to unmake the song. Part 6. The problem with the obvious answer. Now the easy thing to do here, the thing a lazier telling of this mystery would do, is to stop at Melkor. To say, well, the nameless things must be Melkor's creatures, his monsters, things he bred or made or corrupted in the deep places long ago, and they simply outlived him. Case closed. mystery solved. But the text will not let us do that, and this is where it gets interesting. Because Gandalf is very specific. He does not say the Nameless Things are Morgoth's servants. He does not say they are creatures of the enemy. He says that even Sauron does not know of them. And Sauron knew Morgoth's works intimately. Sauron was Morgoth's chief lieutenant for the entire span of the First Age. Sauron helped build Morgoth's armies, helped breed his monsters, helped run his fortresses. If the Nameless Things were Morgoth's creatures, Sauron would almost certainly know about them. He would have records, memories, some thread of awareness. The fact that Sauron does not know about them tells us something crucial. The Nameless Things are not part of the catalogue of evil that passed from Morgoth to Sauron. They are outside it. They are something that even the dark powers did not create and do not command. And this is the detail that elevates the whole mystery from simple monster lore into something philosophically vast. Because in Tolkien's world, evil, capital E evil, the evil of Morgoth and Sauron, is a known thing. It has a history. It has an origin. It has a shape and a logic and a hierarchy. The Balrogs serve their masters. The orcs were bred and corrupted. The dragons were made. Even Shelob, ancient and horrible as she is, has a lineage. She is the last child of Ungoliant, and we know roughly what Ungoliant was. The Nameless Things have no such lineage. They are not part of the family tree of evil. They are something else entirely. Something that does not fit into the moral architecture of the entire mythology. They are not good. They are not evil. They are not aligned with the Valar or with Morgoth. They simply are, and they simply have been, since before the categories of good and evil had any meaning in the deep places of the world. That is a far more frightening idea than a monster. A monster you can fight. A monster has a place in the story, a role, a relationship to the heroes and the villains. The Nameless Things have no place in the story. They are entirely indifferent to it. And indifference, on that scale, is a kind of horror that no sword can answer. Part 7. Ungoliant. The closest we can get to a face. If you want to understand what kind of thing might be lurking in the deep places, if you want a single example from Tolkien's own writing that shows us the shape of this category of being, then you have to talk about Ungoliant. Because Ungoliant is the closest thing in all the legends to a named version of the Nameless. Ungoliant appears in the Silmarillion in the ancient days of the First Age, and she is one of the most genuinely disturbing creatures Tolkien ever wrote. She takes the form of a monstrous spider, a vast, bloated, light-devouring horror. But the text is very careful to tell us that this is only a form she has taken, and that no one truly knows what she was or where she came from. And here is the line that connects her directly to our mystery. The Silmarillion says that some believed she was one of the spirits that descended in the beginning with Melkor, that she was a thing of his discord. But it also says that she repudiated her master, that she came to desire only to feed her own emptiness, to devour light and life and substance, until there was nothing left, not even herself. She served no one. She wanted nothing but to consume. Even Morgoth himself, the great Dark Lord, came to fear her, and in the end, after she had helped him destroy the two trees that lit the world, she turned on him, and he had to be rescued from her by his own Balrogs. Think about that. Morgoth, the most powerful being ever to enter the world, the source of all evil, had to be saved from Ungoliant. There was a hunger in her so vast and so alien that even the Dark Lord could not stand against it alone. And what happened to her? The legends do not say for certain. Some say she wandered into the uttermost south of the world and devoured herself at last, her hunger turning finally inward when there was nothing else left to eat. But the Silmarillion leaves it open. It says her fate is unknown. Now, hold that thought against everything we have said about the Nameless Things. A being of unknown origin, possibly older than the structured evil of Morgoth's realm. A being that serves no master and follows no logic but the logic of its own hunger. A being that gnaws and devours and consumes for reasons that have nothing to do with the wars and ambitions of the surface world. A being whose final fate is simply unknown, who might still be out there, or down there, somewhere in the dark. Ungoliant is not one of the Nameless Things. But Ungoliant shows us the template. She shows us that Tolkien's world has room in it for horrors that exist entirely outside the moral structure of the story, ancient, hungry, self-serving things that frighten even the gods. And if there was one Ungoliant the Silmarillion hints, there were others like her in kind. Her brood haunted the mountains of terror in the First Age, and her last great child, Shelob, would survive into the Third Age in her lair above Mordor, with the spiders of Mirkwood descending in turn from Shelob's line. But the texts also hint, in their careful and shadowy way, that the spider form was only one shape that this kind of primordial hunger could take. What other shapes might it have taken in the deep places where no one was watching? Part 8. The Watcher in the Water. Before we go deeper into the theories, I want to bring you back to a creature you already know, because there is a nameless thing in The Lord of the Rings that almost everyone forgets is nameless, and it appears right at the doorstep of Moria, in one of the most frightening scenes in the entire first book. The Watcher in the Water. Remember the scene. The Fellowship has reached the west gate of Moria. The doors are shut. There is a still, dark lake before the walls, a lake that should not be there. A lake formed by some blocking of the stream, its water stagnant and oily and wrong. And as they finally open the doors and prepare to enter the mountain, something comes out of the water. A tentacle. Then many tentacles. A writhing mass of pale, groping, snake-like limbs, and at the center of them, glimpsed only for a moment, something the text never fully shows us. It seizes Frodo. Of all the members of the Fellowship, it reaches past everyone else and grabs the ring-bearer specifically, which is a detail that has disturbed careful readers for decades. And the Fellowship fights it off and flees into Moria, and the Watcher pulls the doors shut behind them, tearing the trees from the doorstep, and seals them in. And we never see it again. We never learn what it was. We never learn where it came from or how long it had been there, or whether it acted with intelligence or instinct. Tolkien gives it a name that is not a name. The Watcher in the Water. A description masquerading as a title. And Gandalf himself, when the Fellowship asks about it, says something that should sound very familiar by now. He says that something has crept or has been driven out of the dark waters under the mountains. He says there are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world. There it is again, that exact phrase. Older things, fouler things, the deep places of the world. Gandalf is, without quite saying so, telling the Fellowship that the Watcher is one of these deep mysteries, something that came up from below, something not catalogued, something old. And the detail that it grabbed Frodo, that out of 6 companions it reached unerringly for the one carrying the ring, has fed 1,000 theories. Did it know? Did it sense the ring? Or was it simply chance, simply a hungry thing grabbing the nearest soft body? We do not know. Of course we do not know. That is the pattern. That is always the pattern with these things. They appear, they act according to some logic we cannot read, and they vanish back into the dark. leaving us with nothing but the cold certainty that the world is older and stranger and more crowded with ancient life than we ever suspected. The Watcher in the Water is, I think, the closest the Lord of the Rings ever lets us come to actually seeing a nameless thing. It is the one moment when something from the deep places reaches up into the story and touches our heroes directly. And it is no accident, I think, that Tolkien placed it exactly where he did. At the gate of Moria, at the threshold of the descent, the last thing the Fellowship meets on the surface before they go down into the dark and meet the Balrog. It is a warning. It is the world saying, very quietly, you are about to go down, and you have no idea what is waiting. And there is one more detail about the Watcher that almost no one notices, and it is the most unsettling of all. The lake should not have been there. The text is careful about this. The stream that once flowed clear past the west gate had been dammed, blocked, turned into that stagnant, oily, unnatural pool. Something had dammed it. Something had deliberately, or through its mere presence, changed the flow of the water to create the dark lake in which it waited. That is not the behavior of a mindless beast. That is the behavior of something that shaped its environment, that made a place for itself, that altered the surface of the world to suit whatever dark purpose it served. The Watcher did not simply happen to be in a lake. The lake was made by the Watcher, or for it, and that small detail opens a chasm of implication. Because it means the things from the deep can reach up and reshape the surface. They can dam rivers. They can make lakes. They can change the face of the world to suit themselves. And if the Watcher, a single deep thing pushed up near the surface, could do that, what could the deeper things do, if they ever turned their ancient attention upward? It is a question the book asks in a single buried detail and then, characteristically, refuses to answer. Part 9. What Gandalf saw down there. Let us go back to the Fall. Because Gandalf's journey into the deep is the only first-hand account we have, the only time the narrative actually descends to where the nameless things live, carried on the body of a being who came back to tell a fraction of the tale. Gandalf and the Balrog fell from the bridge, and Gandalf says they fell for a long time. Think about the physical reality of that. A fall long enough to be worth describing as long, by a being who measures time in ages, down past the foundations of stone. And they landed, finally, in water, a deep subterranean lake in the very roots of the mountain, in a place Gandalf calls a far, cold and dark place, lower than the deepest pit the Dwarves had ever dug. And it is here, in this account, that he says the thing about the nameless things. He places them precisely here, in this layer, the layer of the deep water, and below. He says that in that lightless lake, things lived that had no names, that gnawed at the world, and that were older than Sauron. He is not speaking theoretically. He is telling his friends what was around him in that water. He is describing his neighbors during the strangest passage of his long existence. And then something remarkable happens. The Balrog flees. The Balrog, this demon of fire, this terror that scattered the Fellowship and broke the bridge, the Balrog runs. It escapes Gandalf in the dark and flees upward, climbing back toward the light, toward Moria, toward the endless stair that leads to the peak of the mountain. Gandalf pursues it. The hunter becomes the hunted, becomes the hunter again. And they climb up and up, out of the deep places, all the way to the top of the world, to Durin's tower on the peak of Ziraxagil, where they fight their final battle on the mountaintop in the wind and the lightning. Now here is the question almost no one asks. Why did the Balrog flee? The Balrog had every advantage in the deep. It was in the dark, which was its element. It was far from any help Gandalf might find. It had already proven it could fight Gandalf to a standstill. So why, instead of finishing the fight in the deep places where it was strongest, did the Balrog turn and run upward, climbing desperately toward the surface and the light it should have feared? There is an answer that the text supports, and it is an answer that should chill you. The Balrog fled upward because the deep places were not safe for it either. Because down there, in the dark water, in the gnawed tunnels, there were things that even a Balrog, a fellow spirit of the ancient world, a creature of primordial fire and shadow, did not want to be near. The Balrog ran toward the light not because it stopped fearing the light, but because whatever was down there in the dark was worse. Read that scene again with this in mind, and it transforms. The Balrog is not fleeing Gandalf. Or not only Gandalf, the Balrog is fleeing the deep. It is climbing out of a place that even it, a demon of Morgoth, recognized as no place for it to linger. The two of them, the wizard and the demon, both clawing their way up out of the roots of the world, and behind them, below them. The Nameless Things, watching two bright ancient spirits flee their domain and not bothering to pursue. Because why would they? The surface is so far away, and they have all the time there has ever been. Part 10. The second possibility. The leftover spirits. Let me give you the second great theory of what the Nameless Things are, and this one is grounded firmly in Tolkien's own cosmology, in the strange, beautiful, half-finished framework he built for how spirits relate to the physical world. When the Ainur entered Arda, when the great spirits came down into the world to shape it and dwell in it, they were not alone. The texts tell us that a great host of spirits came with them, of varying degrees of power. The mightiest became the Valar, the gods of the world. Beneath them came the Maiar, spirits like Gandalf and Sauron and the Balrogs. But beneath even the Maiar, there were lesser spirits, countless lesser spirits, and Tolkien tells us that many of these became bound to the world in strange ways. Some became the spirits of rivers and forests. Some became things like Tom Bombadil's Goldberry, the River Daughter. Some, perhaps, became fainter and stranger things still, spirits that sank into the matter of the world, that lost their shape and their purpose, that became something neither fully spirit nor fully flesh. And here is the crucial piece. When these spirits entered the world, the texts suggest that some of them went too deep, that in their descent into matter, in their binding to the physical stuff of Arda, some of them became trapped, submerged, sunk so far into the substance of the world that they could never rise again, never take a proper shape, never participate in the history that played out on the surface. They became, in a sense, part of the geology, part of the deep structure of the world, conscious, perhaps, in some slow and alien way, but utterly cut off from the light and the music and the life above. If this is what the Nameless Things are, then they are the saddest horror in all of Tolkien. They would be spirits who came down with all the others, at the beginning full of the same potential, and who fell too far, who sank into the dark and could not climb out, who have been down there since the foundation of the world, neither living nor dead, neither good nor evil, simply existing in a state of profound and ancient isolation, gnawing at the world that swallowed them. And the gnawing takes on a terrible new meaning, if this is true. They would not be eating the world out of hunger or malice. They would be eating it the way a trapped animal chews at the thing that holds it. They would be trying, in some dim and hopeless way, across uncounted ages, to dig their way out, to find the light again, to climb back up to the world they were meant to be part of. But they have forgotten the light. They have been down there too long. The tunnels they dig do not go up. They go sideways and deeper, gnawing and gnawing in the dark, the labor of beings who can no longer remember what they are digging toward, only that they must dig, that they have always dug, that the digging is all that is left of whatever they once were. That is older than Sauron. That is as old as the world. And it is the kind of tragedy that Tolkien, for all his love of clear moral lines, understood better than almost anyone the tragedy of the thing that fell so far it forgot it had ever been anything but fallen. Part 11. The dwarves knew something. Here is a thread that runs quietly through the legends, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The dwarves knew not everything, but something. The dwarves, who dug deeper than any other mortal people, who hollowed out the bones of the mountains in their endless hunger for stone and metal and gem. The dwarves brushed up against the deep places, and what they found there shaped their entire history. Think about Moria. Think about what actually happened to the greatest dwarven kingdom that ever existed. The dwarves of Khazad-dûm dug too greedily and too deep. That is the phrase everyone knows, the warning Gandalf gives. They delved down into the roots of the mountain in search of mithril, the precious silver steel that was found nowhere else in the world. And in their digging, they woke something. They woke Durin's Bane, the Balrog, which had lain hidden in the deep since the fall of Morgoth's kingdom in the First Age, sleeping in the dark for thousands of years until dwarven picks broke into its resting place. Now, the Balrog is not a nameless thing. We have established that. The Balrog has a name, a history, a known origin. But look at the pattern the story is showing us. The dwarves dug down, and in the deep they found something ancient and terrible that had been waiting in the dark since the beginning of the age. The Balrog was, if you like, the shallowest of the deep horrors, the one closest to the surface, the first thing the dwarves hit on their way down. It was sleeping in a lair the dwarves could reach. But what was below the Balrog? The Balrog fell, with Gandalf, far below Moria's deepest pits, into the dark water where the Nameless Things live. So the Balrog's resting place was not the bottom. The Balrog was a middle layer. And the dwarves, digging for mithril, were digging down toward all of it. Toward the Balrog first, yes, but beyond the Balrog, toward the deeper dark. Toward the gnawed tunnels and the Nameless Things. The dwarves, in their greed, were drilling a hole down toward the oldest horrors in the world. And they hit the Balrog first, and the Balrog destroyed them, and so they never reached the deeper layers. In a terrible way, the Balrog saved Middle-earth. Because if the dwarves had kept digging, if they had gone past the Balrog, down into the dark water, down to where the Nameless Things gnaw, what might they have woken then? What might they have let up into the world? Durin's Bane was the thing that stopped the dwarves before they dug too deep. The catastrophe that destroyed Khazad-dûm was also, perhaps, the catastrophe that prevented a far greater one. The dwarves never knew how lucky their disaster was. Part 12. The Hunger and the Patience. I want to talk about time now, because to truly understand the Nameless Things, to feel the horror of them in the way Tolkien wanted us to feel it, you have to recalibrate your sense of time entirely. We are creatures of short time. Even the long-lived peoples of Middle-earth, the elves with their thousands of years, the wizards with their existence stretching back before the world, even they think in spans that the Nameless Things would find laughably brief. The entire history of the Lord of the Rings, the whole War of the Ring, takes place over a matter of months. The whole Third Age, from the fall of Sauron at the end of the Second Age to his final destruction, is about 3,000 years. The whole history of Middle-earth that we know in any detail is maybe 10 or 20,000 years. The Nameless Things are older than that. Older than Sauron, who predates all of it. They have been down in the dark since before the recorded history of the world began. And they will be down there, almost certainly, long after every kingdom on the surface has crumbled to dust and been forgotten. Now imagine consciousness on that scale. Imagine a mind, if it is a mind, that experiences 10,000 years the way we experience an afternoon. To such a being, the rise and fall of Sauron would be a brief flicker, a small light kindled near the surface, burning for a moment, going out. The entire war that consumed all the free peoples of Middle-earth, all their courage and their sacrifice and their desperate hope, would be, to the Nameless Things, less than a single breath, less than a thought. An event so brief and so far away that it might not register at all. And this is the true horror of them. Not that they are monstrous, though they may be. Not that they are evil, they may not be. The horror is that they make everything we care about small. They stand outside the entire frame of the story, looking in, if they look at all, at a drama that means nothing to them. The ring, the quest, the fate of the world, to the Nameless Things. It is all happening very fast and very near the surface, among very small creatures, and it will all be over very soon, and then the dark will be quiet again. The way it has always been, the way it will always be. There is a patience in them that is more frightening than any rage. They do not need to hurry. They do not need to win. They have already outlasted gods, and they will outlast everything else. They simply gnaw and wait and gnaw, and the world wears away around them, grain by grain, age by age, and they are in no hurry at all, because they have all the time that has ever existed, and all the time that ever will. Part 13. Why Tolkien refused to explain. We need to stop here and address the question directly, because it is the secret heart of this entire mystery. Why did Tolkien do this? Why did he, the great world builder, the man who wrote thousands of pages of detailed history and genealogy and linguistics, the man who could not resist explaining almost everything, why did he leave this one thing deliberately, permanently, unexplained? Some people think it was laziness or an oversight, a loose thread he never got around to tying off. I think that is exactly wrong. I think the Nameless Things are one of the most carefully considered things in the entire book. I think Tolkien knew precisely what he was doing. Tolkien wrote, in his letters, about a quality he called the impression of depth. He believed that the power of a story came not from explaining everything, but from the sense that behind the story lay vast reaches of unexplained history and mystery, that the tale you were reading was just the lit portion of something enormous and mostly dark. He compared it to the way an ancient poem feels haunted by older stories it only half remembers. The reader senses the depth without seeing the bottom. And that sensing, that feeling of standing at the edge of something far larger than what you can see, is where the deepest enchantment of a story lives. The Nameless Things are the purest expression of this principle in all of his work. They are depth itself, given a single sentence. They are the bottom of the world that we are told about, but never shown. And the moment Tolkien explained them, the moment he told us what they were, named them, described them, fit them into the catalogue, they would stop being depth and start being just more lore. More monsters. More entries in the encyclopedia of Middle-earth. The mystery would collapse into information, and the cold air coming up out of that hole at the bottom of the world would stop blowing. He refused to explain them, because explaining them would destroy them. Not the creatures, the effect. The feeling, the sense that Middle-earth is not a closed system, not a complete and catalogued world, but a living place with genuine darkness in its depths. darkness that even the author does not fully illuminate. And there is, I think, something even deeper going on. Because Gandalf's refusal to speak of them mirrors Tolkien's refusal to write of them. When Gandalf says he will not tell his friends about the nameless things, because it would only darken the day, that is Tolkien, speaking through his character, telling us the same thing. I will not describe these to you. It would only darken your day. Some things are better left in the dark. Some doors are better left closed. The wisdom of the wisest being in the story and the wisdom of the man who created the whole world turn out to be the same wisdom. There are things it is better not to name. Part 14. The things that gnaw. Let me return to that word again, because I keep coming back to it, and I think you should too. Gnaw. Gandalf says the nameless things gnaw the world. It is such a specific, physical, animal word. Not destroy, not consume, not attack. Gnaw, the slow, persistent, grinding action of teeth on something hard, working at it, wearing it down, never finishing. What does it mean for the world to be gnawed from beneath? In Norse mythology, and Tolkien knew the Norse myths better than almost anyone alive, there is a creature called Nigger, a great serpent or dragon that lives beneath the world tree, Yggdrasil, and gnaws perpetually at its roots. The world tree holds up all the realms of existence, and at its base, in the dark, this serpent chews and chews at the roots that hold everything together. It is one of the oldest images in northern myth, the idea that the foundations of the world are being slowly eaten from below, that there is something down in the dark whose entire purpose is to wear away the things that hold the world up. I do not think it is an accident that Gandalf uses the word gnaw. Tolkien was steeped in this imagery. The nameless things gnawing at the roots of the mountains are a deliberate echo of the serpent gnawing at the roots of the world tree. They are Middle-earth's version of that ancient northern dread. The knowledge that no matter how bright and green and solid the world seems on the surface, down below, in the dark, something is always eating away at the foundations. And the meaning of this is profound, and it is bleak, and it is true to the deepest layer of Tolkien's vision. Because Tolkien believed and built into the very structure of his world the idea of the long defeat. The idea that the world is marred, flawed from its very making by the discord of Melkor, and that all the good and beautiful things in it are fighting a long, slow, losing battle against entropy and decay and the gnawing away of all things. The elves know this. They speak of it. They know that even their greatest works will fade, that the tide of time runs against them, that they are preserving beauty in the full knowledge that it cannot last forever. The nameless things are the long defeat made flesh. They are the gnawing at the roots, the wearing away at the foundations, the patient and unstoppable entropy that lives in the deep places of every world. They do not need to be evil. They do not need to have a plan. They are simply the force that eats away at the bottom of things, and they have been eating since the beginning, and they will be eating at the end. The world is being gnawed. It always has been. And one day, in the unimaginably distant future, the gnawing will be finished. Part 15. The dark beneath every world. I want to widen the lens for a moment, because I think this mystery touches something that goes beyond Middle-earth, beyond Tolkien, beyond even fantasy itself. Every mythology that humans have ever built has something underneath. There is always a below. The Greeks had the underworld, and beneath even that, Tartarus, the pit where the oldest and most terrible beings were imprisoned, the Titans, the primordial powers that predated the gods themselves. The Norse had the realms beneath the world tree, the gnawing serpent, the dark places where the dead and the monstrous dwelt. Nearly every human culture, across every continent and every age, has imagined that beneath the solid ground we walk on, there is something older, darker, and waiting. Why do we do this? Why does the human imagination, everywhere, always, place horror beneath us? I think it is because we know, on some deep and wordless level, that we are standing on top of things we do not understand. We build our homes and our cities and our whole bright human world on a thin crust of solid ground, and beneath that crust is darkness, and pressure, and ancient stone and depths we cannot see into. The ground feels solid, but we know it is not the bottom. We know there is a down, and a further down, and a further down still, going on past anything we can reach or know. And in that unreachable dark, our imagination places the oldest fear. The fear that we are not alone down there, that something was here before us, that something is underneath us even now. Tolkien tapped into this. The nameless things are not just a feature of Middle-earth. They are an expression of one of the oldest and most universal human dreads. The dread of the deep, the dread of the old. The dread of the indifferent ancient thing beneath our feet. When Gandalf speaks of them, he is speaking to something in us that is far older than the book, far older than Tolkien. Perhaps as old as the first human who ever lay awake at night and felt, beneath the floor of the cave, the weight and the silence and the mystery of all that unknown stone going down and down into the dark. And this is why the nameless things work. This is why a single sentence has haunted readers for 70 years. Tolkien did not invent this fear. He found it where it has always lived, at the bottom of the human mind, and he gave it a place in his world, and he was wise enough, or kind enough, or frightened enough, to leave it mostly in the dark, where it belongs. Part 16. The Things Sauron Could Not See. Let us return to that detail one more time, because the more you think about it, the stranger it becomes. Even Sauron does not know of them. We have talked about what this means for the age of the nameless things. But I want to talk now about what it means for Sauron, because it tells us something about the limits of even the greatest dark power, and it reframes the entire War of the Ring in a way that I find genuinely staggering. Sauron's power at its height was a power of domination and surveillance. He extended his will across Middle-earth like a vast net. He could feel the use of the rings of power. He bent whole nations to his shadow. His eye, in the imagery of the book, was a searchlight of malice that swept across the world looking for threats, for the ring, for anything that might oppose him. Sauron's whole mode of being was to know, to see, to perceive, to extend his awareness into every shadow and every secret. And he could not see beneath himself. Sauron's tower, Barad-dûr, was raised in Mordor, on the surface of the world, looking out across the lands he wished to conquer. His gaze went outward and across, searching the surface of Middle-earth, the kingdoms and the peoples and the places where his enemies moved. But the nameless things were below, beneath the foundations, deeper than his awareness reached, or perhaps simply in a direction he never thought to look. The great eye looked everywhere except straight down, into the dark beneath its own feet, where things older than itself were gnawing at the roots of the very world it sought to rule. There is a lesson in this that goes beyond Middle-earth. The tyrant looks outward, always at his rivals, at his enemies, at the things on his own scale that might challenge him for power. He cannot conceive of a threat that does not want what he wants. The nameless things do not want power. They do not want the ring. They do not want to rule Middle-earth. And so they are completely invisible to a being whose entire consciousness is organized around the desire for domination. Sauron could only see the things that played his game. The nameless things were not playing. And here is the final turn of the screw. If Sauron had won, if the ring had not been destroyed, if the shadow had covered all of Middle-earth, if every free people had fallen, and Sauron had become the unchallenged lord of the entire surface world, even then, even in total victory, he would have been standing on top of something older and stranger than himself, something he could not see, and could not rule, and could not even imagine. His dominion would have been a thin film of shadow stretched across the surface of a world that was, in its deepest places, utterly indifferent to him. He could conquer the surface. He could never conquer the deep. The nameless things would have gnawed on, beneath the feet of the victorious Dark Lord, exactly as they gnawed beneath everyone else, and his great victory would have meant nothing to them at all. Part 17. The third possibility. They were always there. Now I want to give you the strangest theory of all, the one that goes furthest and disturbs me most, and that the text does not rule out. What if the nameless things were never created at all? Everything we have discussed so far assumes an origin. The spirits of the discord, created in the music. The leftover Maiar descended at the world's beginning. Even Ungoliant, whose origin is mysterious, is assumed to have come from somewhere, to have entered the world at some point. We keep looking for the moment the nameless things began. But what if there was no such moment? What if they are not part of the creation at all, not part of the music, not descended with the Ainur, not made by anyone or sung by anyone? What if they were simply there, in the dark, in the deep, when the world was made around them? Tolkien's creation story is grand and total, Ilúvatar and the music and the shaping of Arda. But every creation story has an edge, a place where the made world meets the unmade. The music shaped the world out of the void, out of the nothing that existed before there was a something. And the void did not vanish when the world was made. It surrounds the world still. The texts speak of the outer dark, the void beyond the walls of the world, the emptiness into which Morgoth was finally cast at the end of the First Age. There is a within and a without to Tolkien's world, and the without is the ancient, uncreated dark. So here is the possibility. What if some of the deep places of the world open not toward the center of Arda, but towards that older dark? What if, when the world was sung into being, it was sung around things that were already in the void, things that the music did not create but merely enclosed, sealing them into the deep places as the world took shape around them? Things that are not part of the creation, but older than the creation. Older than the music, older than Ilúvatar's first theme, that would make them older than Sauron, in a way that goes almost beyond meaning. They would be older than the world, older than the gods, older than the song that made everything. They would be fragments of the primordial dark, the uncreated emptiness, caught and held in the roots of a world that was sung into being around them. And they would gnaw at that world, not out of malice, but out of something more fundamental, the simple, bottomless tendency of the void to reclaim what was made from it. The nothing, eating slowly at the edges of the something, from the deepest places where the two still touch. I told you this one would go far. And I want to be honest with you, the text does not confirm this. Tolkien never says the nameless things come from the void. But he never says they don't. And the phrase older than Sauron, when you really push on it, when you follow it all the way down, leads to places like this. Because in Tolkien's cosmology, there are very few things genuinely older than Sauron, and the oldest of all of them is the dark that existed before the world was made. If the nameless things touch that dark, if they are, in some sense, pieces of it, then they are the oldest things in the entire mythology, older than everything except Ilúvatar himself. And they live beneath our feet. And they gnaw. Part 18. The Balrog was the warning. I want to come back to Durin's Bane, because I think the Balrog's whole story is a kind of parable about the deep, and most people read it backwards. We tend to think of the Balrog as the great horror of Moria, the thing in the dark, the flame of Durin, the demon that killed Gandalf. And it is all of those things. But in the context of the Nameless Things, the Balrog plays a very different role. The Balrog is not the deepest horror. The Balrog is the warning sign. The Balrog is the thing that lives close enough to the surface that we can see it, name it, fight it, and its presence is a message about what lies below it. Consider what the Balrog actually was. A Maya, a spirit of the same order as Gandalf, fallen long ago to the service of Morgoth, a being of shadow and flame that fought in the great wars of the First Age. When Morgoth was defeated and his kingdom destroyed, the surviving Balrogs fled, and they fled downward. They hid themselves in the deep places of the earth, in the roots of the mountains, and there they lay hidden for thousands of years. Now here is what that tells us. The Balrog, fleeing the fall of its master, chose to hide in the deep. It went down into the dark to escape the powers of the surface world. And it found down there a place to sleep, a layer of the deep world that was empty enough or safe enough for a Balrog to hide in for an age. But it did not go all the way down. It did not flee into the deepest places. It stopped at a layer that the Dwarves could eventually reach with their minds. Why didn't it go deeper? Why didn't the Balrog, seeking the safest possible hiding place, dig down into the very roots of the world, into the deepest dark, where surely no one would ever find it? Because the deepest dark was already occupied. Because below the layer where the Balrog hid, there were things that even a Balrog would not disturb. The Balrog hid in the highest safe layer of the deep, close enough to the surface that the Dwarves eventually dug into it, but as far from the Nameless Things as it could get while still being hidden. The Balrog was caught between two fears, the powers of the surface above and the Nameless Things below, and it chose a middle layer, a compromise, the shallowest part of the deep that was still deep enough to hide in. And when Gandalf fought it, and they fell together into the truly deep places, into the dark water where the Nameless Things gnaw, the Balrog fled upward. We talked about this. It ran for the surface. It abandoned its own ancient hiding place and climbed all the way to the mountaintop, into the open air and the light it had hidden from for thousands of years. Because being exposed on a mountain peak was less terrifying than staying in the deep with whatever Gandalf's presence had stirred. The Balrog, a demon of the Elder World, would rather face death in the light than linger in the dark below. The Balrog is the warning. It is the thing that shows us by its own terror that there is worse below. Every layer of the deep is fleeing the layer beneath it. The Dwarves fled the Balrog. The Balrog fled the Nameless Things. And the Nameless Things flee nothing, because there is nothing below them to flee. They are the bottom. They are what everything else is running away from. Part 19. What lives in the dark water? Let me take you back to that underground sea one more time, because I think it is the single most evocative location in this entire mystery, and I want you to really see it. Gandalf falls and lands in cold, dark water in the uttermost foundations of stone, an underground sea, lightless, in the deep roots of the misty mountains. And he tells us, almost in passing, in that way he has of dropping cosmic horror into a single clause, that nameless things live in that water and gnaw the world there. Picture that water. It has never seen light. Not sunlight, not moonlight, not starlight, not the light of the two trees in the elder days. Not any light at all, ever, since the world was made. It has sat in absolute darkness in the roots of the mountains for the entire history of Arda. And it is not empty. Things live in it. Things move through it. Things that have never needed eyes because there has never been anything to see. Things that have developed across uncounted ages in conditions we can barely imagine. In pressure and cold and total dark. In a sea that has no shore that any living surface creature has ever walked. What would live in such a place? What could live there? On our own earth, we have found life in the deepest, darkest, most hostile places. Creatures clustered around volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean. Things living in conditions that should be impossible. Ecosystems that have never seen the sun and never will. And those are merely the deep places of a young world. Imagine the deep places of a world as old as Arda. A world shaped by gods and marred by discord. A world whose deepest waters have been incubating life, or something like life, since before the first sunrise. The nameless things in that water are not fish. They are not animals as we understand animals. They are something that grew or was always there in conditions of total darkness and unimaginable antiquity. And they gnaw the world, even there in the water. They are eating away at the stone, boring their tunnels, doing the slow, endless work that is the only thing we know about them. And Gandalf swam in that water. Gandalf, clinging to the body of the Balrog, or fighting it, or fleeing through that black sea in the deep. Gandalf was for a time in the water with them. He passed through their domain. He was, for a few terrible moments in his long existence, a small, bright spirit moving through the lightless sea where the oldest things in the world were gnawing in the dark. And whatever he sensed there, whatever brushed against his awareness in that water, whatever he felt moving in the deep around him, that is what he refused to describe. That is what would darken the day. He was in the water with them, and he came out, and he would not say what he found there. I think about that more than almost anything else in the book. The wisest being in Middle-earth, swimming in the dark sea at the bottom of the world, in the company of nameless things, and choosing, forever after, to keep what he learned there to himself. Part 20. The theory of the many. Here is something the language of the passage tells us that we have not yet fully reckoned with. Gandalf does not speak of a nameless thing. He speaks of nameless things. Plural, many of them. He says some of them are older than Sauron, some, implying a range. Implying that there are different kinds, different ages, a whole population of these creatures down there in the dark. This changes the picture considerably. We are not talking about a single ancient horror, one unique monster sleeping in the deep. We are talking about a multitude, a whole hidden world of them, an ecology of the deep, with its own variety, its own range of ages and kinds and forms, some older than Sauron, some, presumably, younger, but still old beyond mortal reckoning. A community, if that word can be stretched to fit them. A civilization even, in some sense we cannot comprehend. Though civilization implies cooperation, and we have no idea whether the nameless things cooperate, or war, or are even aware of one another. Think about what this implies about the scale of the deep world. If there are many nameless things, and they have been gnawing for the entire age of the world, then the deep places must be vast. Far vaster than Moria, far vaster than any mapped underground space. There must be a whole second Middle-earth down there, an inverted world of tunnels and caverns and lightless seas, populated by these ancient gnawing things, going down toward the roots of the mountains in layers and layers of dark that no surface dweller has ever seen or will ever see. And we walk around on the surface, building our kingdoms, fighting our wars, falling in love, and dying and being born. Completely unaware that beneath us, far beneath us, there is another world entirely, older than ours, larger than we know, full of life that has nothing to do with us. The surface of Middle-earth, the whole stage on which the great story plays out, is just the roof of this deeper world. We are the ceiling dwellers. We live on the lid. There is a kind of vertigo in this. The same vertigo you feel when you learn how deep the ocean really is, how much of our own planet is dark water we have never explored, how the world we know is just a thin, bright skin over vast and ancient depths. Tolkien gives us that vertigo in a single plural noun. Things, many things. A whole world of them, down there, in the dark, gnawing, and we never knew, and we never will. Part 21. The kindness of not knowing. I have been talking for a while now about how frightening all of this is. And it is frightening. But I want to turn the lantern a different way for a moment, because there is something in this mystery that is not only horror. There is something almost merciful in it. And I think Tolkien knew that too. Gandalf says he will not speak of the nameless things because it would darken the day. And we have read that as a horror, as the wise man refusing to name the unnameable terror. But read it again, more gently. Gandalf is, in this moment, protecting his friends. He has come back from the dead. He has been in the deep places. He has seen and felt things down there that he carries now alone in his own memory. And he chooses not to pass that burden to the people he loves. He chooses to let them have the day, the bright forest, the reunion, the joy of being together again, without darkening it with the knowledge of what gnaws beneath the world. That is not only fear. That is kindness. That is a friend deciding that some knowledge is a weight and choosing to carry it alone rather than share it. Gandalf shoulders the memory of the deep so that Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli do not have to. He keeps the darkness in himself so the day can stay bright for the others. And there is a lesson in that for all of us, I think. We live, all of us, on the surface of things we do not fully understand. There are deep places beneath every life, old fears, old darknesses, the knowledge of death and loss, and the vast, indifferent ages of time. And we cannot live well if we are always staring down into those depths. We have to be able to close the door sometimes. We have to be able to say, as Gandalf does, I will not speak of that now, because it would only darken the day. Not because we are denying the dark. Gandalf does not deny it. He knows it is there. He has been in it. He tells his friends it exists. But he chooses not to dwell in it. He chooses the day. There is a wisdom in knowing that the dark is there, and choosing the light anyway, not out of ignorance. Gandalf is the least ignorant being in the world, but out of a deliberate, hard-won understanding that the surface, the day, the bright green world of friends and forests and ordinary joy is worth protecting precisely because it is so thin, and the dark beneath it is so deep. The nameless things make the daylight more precious, not less. The gnawing in the deep is the reason to treasure the green grass and the warm sun, and the company of those we love, because it will not last, because it is small and brief and surrounded by ancient dark, because the day is a gift, and the dark is always waiting, and the only sane response is to love the day fiercely for as long as it lasts. Part 21b. The things that make no sound. There is a detail in Gandalf's account that we have not yet examined, and it is one of the strangest of all. He tells us that the nameless things gnaw the world. But think about what gnawing implies, and then think about what is missing from every account we have of the deep places. Sound. When the dwarves dug Moria, the mountain rang with their labour, the strike of picks, the ring of hammers, the deep songs they sang in their delving. When the Balrog moved through the dark, there was fire and roaring and the crack of the whip. When the watcher rose at the gate, there was the churn of water and the snap of breaking trees. The surface world and even the upper deeps are full of sound, the noise of life, of labor, of violence, of the bright loud business of beings who want things and do things and make their mark on the world. But the nameless things gnawing in the deep, we hear nothing of their sound. Gandalf describes them, but he does not describe a noise. And gnawing, real gnawing, the slow patient working of teeth on stone across uncounted ages, would be almost silent. A sound so slow and so low and so constant that it would not register as sound at all. The deepest places of the world are not loud. They are silent. A silence so old and so total that it has never been broken, because there has never been anything down there that needed to make a sound. The nameless things do not roar. They do not sing. They do not speak. They gnaw, in silence, in the dark, and the silence is part of the horror, because sound is communication, sound is life reaching out to life, and the nameless things reach out to nothing and communicate with no one. They are the silent gnawing at the bottom of a world full of song. Think about how much of Middle-earth is defined by song. The elves sing, the dwarves sing, the hobbits sing. The very world was sung into being by the music of the Aenir. Song is everywhere in Tolkien. It is the medium of creation itself, the way meaning and beauty and life express themselves. And the nameless things are the part of the world that does not sing. They are the silence beneath the song. The deep, soundless, ancient quiet at the bottom of a singing world. And if the world was made by music, then the silence of the nameless things is the most alien thing about them. They are the part of creation that has fallen out of the song entirely, that gnaws in a silence so deep it is almost a kind of anti-music, a negation of the very thing that made the world. That, perhaps, is the deepest sense in which they are nameless. A name is a sound. A name is something you sing, or speak, or call. And the nameless things make no sound and answer to no call, and exist in a silence so old and so total that no name has ever reached them, and none ever will. They are the silent things. The soundless deep. The quiet at the bottom of the world that the song never reaches. Part 22. The Echo in Tom Bombadil. I want to bring in another piece of the puzzle now. A strange one, an oblique one, but I think it belongs here. Because there is one other being in The Lord of the Rings who exists outside the normal categories, who is older than almost everything, whose nature Tolkien deliberately refused to explain. And that being is Tom Bombadil. Now, Tom Bombadil is not a nameless thing. He is the opposite. In many ways, he is the most named being in the book, full of song and laughter and bright blue and yellow, living in the green country with Goldberry, the eldest and merriest of all the strange old powers. But Tom and the nameless things share something crucial. They are both deliberate mysteries. They are both beings that Tolkien placed outside the explained world on purpose and refused to categorize. When the Council of Elrond discusses Tom Bombadil, they describe him as the oldest, Eowyn ben Adar, oldest and fatherless. They say he was there before the river and the trees, before the first acorn, before the Dark Lord came from outside. Tom himself says he remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn, that he knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside. Before the Dark Lord came from outside. That phrase again, outside, the void. The dark beyond the world. So Tom Bombadil is old in the same direction as the nameless things. He remembers the world before the shadow fell, before evil entered from beyond the walls. He is a being from the dawn of things, maybe from before the dawn. And Tolkien refused, absolutely and permanently, to explain what he was, turned aside every question, in the books and in his letters, insisting that some things should remain a mystery, that Tom represented something that was meant to be unexplained. Here is why I bring him up. Tom Bombadil and the Nameless Things are two faces of the same coin, the same impulse in Tolkien's imagination, the same refusal to explain, pointing in two opposite directions. Tom is the bright mystery. The Nameless Things are the dark mystery. Tom is the ancient power that loves the world, that sings to it, that takes joy in every growing thing, that is so at peace with the deep old world that even the ring has no power over him. The Nameless Things are the ancient powers that gnaw the world, that live in the lightless deep, that are so indifferent to the surface that Sauron himself cannot see them. Two kinds of ancient, two kinds of mystery. The eldest joy, dancing in the green country in the sunlight. The eldest dread, gnawing in the black water in the dark. And between them, on the thin bright surface, the whole story of the Lord of the Rings plays out. The brief, desperate, beautiful struggle of small mortal creatures, watched over by the bright old power and undermined by the dark old powers, living out their short lives on the narrow stage between the eldest light and the eldest dark. Part 23. Why They Never Rise. Here is a question that should have occurred to you by now, and it is worth confronting directly. If the Nameless Things are so old, so powerful, so terrible, why don't they ever come up? Why does the surface world remain, for the most part, untroubled by them? Why isn't Middle-earth constantly under siege from below? The answer, I think, is the most important thing we can understand about them. They never rise because they do not want anything that is up here. Every threat in The Lord of the Rings is a threat because it wants something. Sauron wants the ring, wants dominion, wants to rule. The orcs want to kill and plunder. The dragons want gold. Even the Balrog, when it is woken, lashes out. It has the rage and the violence of Morgoth's old servants. All of these threats reach toward the surface world because the surface world has something they desire. They are connected to us by want. The Nameless Things want nothing from us. There is nothing on the surface they desire. They do not eat us, they eat the world itself, the stone, the deep substance of things. They do not want our gold or our kingdoms or our ring. They do not want to rule us. The concept of ruling surface creatures would be as meaningless to them as us wanting to rule the bacteria in the soil. They are complete in the deep. They have everything they need down there, the endless stone to gnaw, the lightless water, the ancient dark. The surface is simply not relevant to them. And this is why they are, in a strange way, not a threat at all, and why that is more frightening than if they were. A threat can be fought, bargained with, understood, defeated. The Nameless Things cannot be any of those, because they are not engaged with us in the first place. You cannot defeat something that is not attacking you. You cannot bargain with something that wants nothing from you. You cannot even be seen by something that is not looking at you. The Nameless Things and the surface world exist in almost total mutual irrelevance, two worlds stacked one atop the other, with so little in common that they barely interact at all. The only times the worlds touch are accidents. The Dwarves dig too deep and wake the Balrog, an intrusion from above into the edge of the deep. The Watcher in the water is driven, somehow, up to the gates of Moria, a single deep thing pushed up into the light by some disturbance we never learn about. Gandalf falls into the deep sea, a being from above, plunged by chance into the world below. These are the rare moments of contact, and they are always catastrophic, and they are always accidents. The nameless things do not seek us out. They are found occasionally by those unlucky enough to fall or dig into their domain. And then the worlds touch, briefly, terribly, and then they separate again, and the deep goes back to its gnawing, and the surface goes back to its wars, and neither thinks much about the other ever again. Part 24. The Roots of the Mountains. There is a phrase that recurs in Tolkien's deep places, and I want to draw it out because it carries more than it seems to. The roots of the mountains. The roots of the world. Gandalf speaks of being far under the living earth, where the world is gnawed by nameless things, in the roots of the mountains. Mountains do not have roots, of course. Not literally. But the image is ancient and powerful. It suggests that the mountains are not merely piled up stone, but living things, grown things, with deep structures reaching down into the earth the way a tree's roots reach down into the soil. And if the mountains have roots, then they are anchored in something. They reach down into a deeper layer, a foundational layer, the bedrock of the whole world. And it is there, in the roots of the mountains, that the nameless things gnaw. Not in caves near the surface, not even in the deep mines of the dwarves. In the roots, in the deepest foundational structure of the world. The place where the mountains themselves are anchored into the body of Arda. The nameless things are gnawing at the anchors, at the foundations, at the deep structures that hold the whole world in its shape. This connects back to that Norse image, the serpent at the roots of the world tree, but it also connects to something in the structure of Tolkien's world that is easy to miss. Arda, the world, was not a stable, finished creation. It was marred from the beginning. The shape of the world was disputed, fought over, damaged in the wars of the gods. Mountains were raised and thrown down. Seas were poured out and drained. The very continents were broken and reshaped across the ages. Beleriand drowned at the end of the First Age, Menor swallowed by the sea. The whole world bent and changed in the great catastrophes of history. The world of Middle-earth is a wounded world, a reshaped world, a world whose very geology bears the scars of ancient violence. And down in the roots of that wounded world, the nameless things gnaw. They are working at the foundations of a structure that is already cracked, already marred, already fighting a long defeat against the forces of decay and unmaking. Every age, the world wears down a little more. Every age, the bright things fade a little further, and in the roots, the gnawing continues, patient and endless, wearing away at the anchors that hold the mountains up, working towards some final dissolution that lies so far in the future that even the elves cannot imagine it. The roots of the mountains are where the world is most vulnerable, and most ancient, and most alone. And that is exactly where the nameless things have always been. Part 25. The fear that has no enemy. I keep circling back to one idea, because I think it is the deepest truth of this whole mystery, and I want to make sure it lands fully. The horror of the nameless things is the horror of a fear that has no enemy. Every other fear in Tolkien has a shape you can push against. Sauron can be resisted, the ring can be destroyed, the Balrog can be fought and even slain at terrible cost. The Nazgul can be scattered. The armies of Mordor can be met on the field. All of these are enemies, and an enemy, however terrible, gives you something to do. You can stand against an enemy. You can die well against an enemy. You can hope to defeat an enemy. The presence of an enemy organizes your fear into courage, into resistance, into the meaningful struggle that is the whole spine of the heroic story. The nameless things give you nothing to push against. They are not your enemy. They are not anyone's enemy. They do not oppose you, because to oppose you they would have to acknowledge you, and they do not. There is no standing against them, because they are not advancing. There is no defeating them, because they are not attacking. There is no dying well against them, because they will not fight you. They will simply, if you fall into their domain, do whatever it is they do, with the same indifference they show to the stone they gnaw. You cannot be a hero against the nameless things. Heroism requires an enemy who can be opposed, and the nameless things cannot be opposed any more than you can oppose the passage of time or the cooling of the stars. This is a very particular and very modern kind of horror, and it is remarkable that Tolkien, so often dismissed as a writer of simple good versus evil stories, reached it so completely. Because the deepest fears of the modern age are exactly this kind of fear. The fear of vast, impersonal forces that do not hate us, but simply do not care. The fear of a universe that is not evil, but is indifferent, ancient, and unimaginably larger than we are. The fear of being small and brief and beneath the notice of the great old things that surround us. This is the horror that lives at the bottom of the modern mind, and Tolkien put it at the bottom of his world, in the roots of the mountains, in a single sentence about nameless things that gnaw. And he was wise enough not to let his heroes fight it. There is no chapter where Aragorn descends into the deep to battle a nameless thing. There is no quest to cleanse the roots of the mountains. The nameless things remain exactly what they are. Outside the story, beneath the story, untouched and untouchable by the heroism that drives everything on the surface. They are the one thing in Middle-earth that the heroes cannot reach, cannot fight, cannot redeem, and cannot escape. They simply are. And the story flows on above them, bright and brave and brief, and they gnaw on beneath it, and the two never truly meet. Part 26. The Silence After Gandalf. Let us think about what happened after Gandalf spoke those words. Because there is a silence in the text, right after, that I think is one of the most eloquent silences in the whole book. Gandalf tells Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli about the fall, about the deep, about the nameless things. And then he stops. He says he will not speak further of it, because it would darken the day. And the conversation moves on. Nobody presses him. Nobody says, "Wait, Gandalf, what do you mean, nameless things? What were they? What did you see?" The three companions, themselves no strangers to the deep places, Gimli especially, a dwarf whose whole people delve in the dark, they hear Gandalf's words, and they let them lie. They do not ask. They move on to other matters, to the war, to the immediate concerns of the surface world. Why don't they ask? I think they don't ask, because they understand. Gimli, of all of them, would understand. A dwarf knows the deep, knows that there are places his people do not dig, knows the old warnings passed down through the generations about the dark below the dark. When Gandalf says there are nameless things in the deep, Gimli does not need it explained. He has felt the edge of that knowledge his whole life. His people lost Khazad Diem to the deep. He knows. And Aragorn and Legolas, ancient and wise in their own ways, also understand. They hear Gandalf decline to speak of it, and they recognize the wisdom in that refusal, and they honor it with their silence. They do not pull at the thread. They do not demand the darkening of the day. They accept that some things are known and not spoken, felt and not described, carried and not shared. That silence, that collective decision not to ask, is itself a piece of the horror and a piece of the wisdom. It tells us that the nameless things are not Gandalf's private knowledge alone. They are something the wise have always half known, a shared, unspoken understanding among the old and the deep dwelling that there are things below that are better left unnamed. Gandalf is not revealing a secret. He is confirming a dread that they all already carry, and then, by mutual unspoken agreement, they all decide together to set it down and return to the light. It is the way people behave around the truly terrible things. Not screaming, not questioning, just a moment of shared, quiet acknowledgement, and then a turning away, a returning to the business of living, because there is nothing else to be done, and because to stare too long into that particular dark is to be unable to do anything at all. Part 27. The deep places of every mythology. I touched on this earlier, but I want to come back to it and go deeper, because I think it is the key to why this particular mystery resonates so powerfully, and why it feels so much larger than a single sentence in a single book. Tolkien was a scholar of the old stories. He spent his life immersed in the myths and legends of the northern world, the Norse sagas, the Old English poems, the deep rootstock of European myth. And one of the most persistent features of those old stories is the presence of the ancient buried thing, the dragon on its hoard in the barrow, the Draugr, the walking dead, in the burial mound, the serpent beneath the world tree, the giants imprisoned beneath the earth, older than the gods, waiting. Again and again the old stories return to this image, that beneath the world of the living, in the dark, in the deep, there are old things, buried things, things that predate the current order of the world and that wait, with terrible patience, in the places below. Beowulf, the poem Tolkien loved above almost all others, the poem he spent his career studying, is built around exactly this. The dragon at the end of Beowulf is an ancient thing, sleeping on its hoard in a barrow beneath the earth for 300 years, until it is disturbed and rises to destroy. And before the dragon, there is Grendel, and Grendel's mother, who live in a dark mere, an underwater lair, a deep and lightless place that the hero must descend into to confront the horror at the bottom. The pattern is ancient. The hero goes down into the dark water to face the old thing in the deep. It is one of the oldest shapes a story can take. Tolkien knew all of this in his bones, and when he placed the Nameless Things in the deep water beneath Middle-earth, he was not inventing something new. He was reaching back, all the way back, to the oldest layer of the human imagination, the layer that always, in every culture, places the most ancient horror in the deepest dark beneath us. He was giving Middle-earth the same deep structure that the real myths have. He was making his world feel old in the way that the real old stories feel old, haunted by a darkness below that predates everything, that the bright surface stories only ever glimpse. This is why the Nameless Things feel so true, so resonant, so much weightier than their single sentence should allow. They are not just Tolkien's invention. They are the modern reappearance of the oldest dread in human storytelling. When you feel the chill of that passage, you are feeling something that connects you backward through Beowulf and the sagas and the myths all the way to the first storytellers crouched around the first fires, telling each other about the things in the dark below. Tolkien tapped the deepest root, and the Nameless Things draw their power from that root, from the entire history of human fear of the deep, distilled into one wizard's refusal to speak. Part 28. The question of awareness. Here is something we have circled but never landed on directly. Are the Nameless Things aware? Do they think? Do they know they exist? This is, in some ways, the most disturbing question of all, because both answers are terrible. Suppose they are not aware. Suppose they are mindless, vast, ancient processes, gnawing at the world the way water gnaws at stone, without thought, without intention, without any inner experience at all. Then they are a kind of living entropy, a blind force of decay given form, eating the foundations of the world for no reason, toward no end, with no more awareness than rust has of the iron it consumes. There is a horror in that, the horror of meaninglessness, of a universe in which the deepest and oldest forces are simply blind and purposeless, grinding everything down toward nothing without ever knowing or caring that they do. But suppose they are aware. Suppose there is something it is like to be a nameless thing, some slow, alien, incomprehensible inner experience, stretched across ages, conscious in a way we cannot imagine. Then we have to ask, what is it like to be that? To be conscious in the absolute dark, in the deep water, for the entire age of the world. To have a mind, and to have spent that mind's entire existence gnawing stone in the lightless deep? What does such a mind think about? What does it know? Does it remember the beginning of the world? Does it know it is alone? Does it suffer? Does it dream? And here is the part that should truly unsettle you. If they are aware, if they think, then they have had more time to think than any other being in the world. They have been down there, conscious, for longer than the elves, longer than Sauron, longer than anything. Whatever thoughts a mind could think in that span of time, in that darkness, they have thought them. Whatever can be understood by a consciousness that old, they understand it. They might be wise beyond any wisdom on the surface, wise in a way that has nothing to do with us. A deep, dark, ancient wisdom accumulated across the entire history of the world, in the silence of the deep, with no one to share it and no reason to share it. We do not know which it is. Mindless force or ancient mind, blind entropy or terrible wisdom. And we cannot know, because the one being who might have sensed the answer, Gandalf in the dark water, chose not to tell us. He felt something down there. He came back changed. And whatever he understood about the awareness or the unawareness of the things in the deep, he kept it behind his teeth for the rest of his time in Middle-earth, and he took it with him when he sailed at last into the West. Part 29. The Changed Wizard. Let us talk about that. Because Gandalf came back from the deep changed, and we usually attribute the change entirely to his battle with the Balrog, and his death and his return. But I want to suggest that the deep itself changed him, that the journey through the roots of the world, through the dark water, past the nameless things, left a mark on him that the story shows us if we know how to look. Gandalf the Grey went down into Moria. Gandalf the White came back. We are told that he was sent back, returned by powers beyond the world to finish his task. His power enhanced, his authority increased. He is greater, after the deep, than he was before. But he is also stranger, more distant. There are moments, after his return, where Gandalf seems to be operating on a different level than everyone around him, where he sees further, knows more, and is somehow more alone in his knowledge. He has been somewhere the others have not. He has seen the bottom of the world. And he says, himself, that he has changed. He says he has passed through fire and deep water. Deep water. He names it. The deep water is part of what changed him. Not just the fire of the Balrog, but the deep water of the Nameless Things. He went down into the oldest dark in the world, and he came back, and he was not the same, and part of what he brought back was the knowledge of what lives down there. I think this is why Gandalf, after his return, has that quality of someone carrying a great and lonely knowledge. He has seen the scale of things. He has been to the place where the entire War of the Ring looks small. He has swum in the sea where the nameless things gnaw. And he has felt in his own being how brief and small and near the surface the whole bright struggle of the surface world really is. And he comes back to fight that struggle anyway, to give everything for it, to lead the free peoples, to spend himself completely in the war against Sauron, knowing all the while that beneath it all, the deep is gnawing, indifferent, eternal. That is a kind of heroism we do not often name. The heroism of fighting for the surface world while knowing how thin it is. The heroism of treasuring the brief bright struggle while carrying the knowledge of the deep dark that surrounds it. Gandalf comes back from the bottom of the world, having seen how little it all means against the scale of the deep, and he chooses to act as if it means everything. Because it does mean everything. To the small, brief creatures who live on the surface, whose whole world it is. And Gandalf, who has seen the bottom, chooses them. Chooses the day. Chooses the light, knowing the dark, exactly as he chooses not to speak of the nameless things, so that the day can stay bright for his friends. The deep changed him. But it did not break him. It gave him, instead, the terrible clarity of someone who has seen the whole scale of things, and chosen, anyway, to fight for the small, bright part of it that can be loved. Part 30. What the nameless things are not. By now we have explored what the nameless things might be. Spirits of the discord, leftover Maya sunk too deep, fragments of the primordial void, an ecology of ancient dark. But it is worth being clear about what they are not, because the negative space defines them as sharply as any theory. They are not Sauron's servants. We have established this. They are outside his knowledge and his command. They are not Morgoth's creatures, at least not in any simple sense. They are not part of the catalogue of evil that Sauron inherited, and Morgoth's known works are documented in the histories in a way the nameless things never are. They are not Balrogs. The Balrogs are named, known, catalogued. They have a clear origin and a clear nature. The nameless things are explicitly distinguished from them. Gandalf fights the Balrog and names it, then speaks separately of the nameless things as a different and deeper category. They are not dragons, not orcs, not trolls, not any of the named monsters of Middle-earth. All of those have lineages, origins, places in the structure of the world. The nameless things have none. They are not the Watcher in the water, or rather the Watcher may be one of them, or one of their kin, but the Watcher is the exception that proves the rule. The Watcher came up, briefly, and acted, and we glimpsed it. The true nameless things never come up. They never act on the surface. They are defined precisely by their absence from the story. And here is the most important negative of all. They are not a metaphor that resolves. Many mysterious things in fiction turn out, on close reading, to be symbols for something, death or sin, or the unconscious, or some neat thematic concept that the careful reader can decode. The nameless things resist this. They are not a tidy symbol. You cannot say the nameless things represent X and feel that you have captured them. They are too deliberately empty, too carefully unexplained, to be pinned to any single meaning. They gesture toward many things: entropy, the long defeat, the indifference of deep time, the dark beneath the human mind. But they are not reducible to any of them. They remain, finally, what their name says they are: nameless, beyond the reach of the words we would use to capture them. That is their final defense and their final power. You cannot name them, and you cannot fully interpret them, and you cannot fight them, and you cannot reach them. They sit at the bottom of the world and the bottom of the story and the bottom of meaning itself, gnawing, and every attempt to bring them up into the light, to name them, to explain them, to understand them, fails, exactly as Tolkien intended it to fail. They are the part of the world that stays dark, no matter how bright the lantern you bring. Part 31. The weight of a single sentence. I want to step back now and marvel just for a moment at the sheer craft of what Tolkien did here. Because when you look at it clearly, it is astonishing. He created the most resonant horror in his entire mythology, a horror that has haunted readers for 70 years, that has spawned countless discussions and theories and late-night unsettled thoughts, and he did it in essentially one sentence. A handful of words in a single speech. He did not write a chapter about the nameless things. He did not write a page. He wrote, in effect, one breath of dialogue, and then he closed the door and never opened it again. Compare this to how most fantasy handles its ancient horrors. The modern instinct is to explain, to elaborate, to build out the lore, to give the ancient evil a name, a history, a stat block, a backstory, a place in an expanding catalogue of monsters. The instinct is that more detail means more depth, that the more we know about a thing, the more powerful it becomes. And this instinct is almost always wrong. Because the more you explain a horror, the smaller it gets. Every detail you add is a wall you build around it, a limit you place on it, a way of containing it within the known. The fully explained monster is a tame monster. It has been brought up into the light and measured and catalogued, and in the measuring, its power has drained away. Tolkien understood the opposite truth. He understood that the deepest horror is the unexplained one, the one that stays in the dark, that resists every attempt to know it, that you can feel the weight and the cold of without ever being able to see its shape. He understood that one sentence about a thing you cannot see is more powerful than 1,000 pages about a thing you can. And so he exercised the hardest discipline a world builder can exercise, the discipline of restraint. He had the whole apparatus of his mythology available. He could have explained the nameless things, fit them into the cosmology, given them a chapter in the Silmarillion. And he chose, instead, to leave them in the dark, to let the one sentence do its work, to trust the reader's imagination to do what no description ever could. That is mastery. That is a writer who understood at the deepest level that the imagination is more powerful than the page, and that the greatest thing a storyteller can do is sometimes to stop, to gesture toward the dark, and then fall silent, and let the listener's own mind fill the deep places with whatever it fears most. The nameless things are whatever you, personally, are most afraid might be down there in the dark. Tolkien did not tell you. He left the space for you to fill. And that is why they have lasted, and why they will keep lasting, as long as people keep reading and keep feeling that cold air rising from the bottom of the world. Part 32. The Things Below Us Now. I want to bring this all the way back up to the surface now, back up to us, to where we are sitting, to the world we actually live in. Because I think the nameless things are not only a feature of Middle-earth. I think they are a way of talking about something real, something that all of us carry, whether we have ever read a word of Tolkien or not. We all live on a surface. Our daily lives, our concerns, our loves and fears and plans, they all take place on a kind of surface, a bright, thin layer of the immediate and the knowable. And beneath that surface, in all of us, there are deep places. There is the knowledge of our own death, waiting in the dark below. There is the vastness of time, the billions of years before us and after us, in which our whole lives are less than a single gnaw of a nameless thing's teeth. There is the indifference of the universe, the cold fact that the great old forces of reality, entropy, time, the slow running down of all things, do not know us and do not care about us and will continue long after we are gone. These are the nameless things beneath every human life, the deep, ancient, indifferent truths that we live above, and mostly do not look at, because to look at them too long is to be unable to live. And Tolkien's wisdom, Gandalf's wisdom, is the wisdom of how to live above them. not by denying them. Gandalf does not deny the deep. He has been in it, he knows it is there, he confirms its existence. But he does not let it darken the day. He carries the knowledge of the deep, and he chooses anyway to love the surface, the green forest, the company of friends, the brief bright struggle that is the only thing small mortal creatures ever really have. He chooses the day, knowing the dark. He fights for the surface, knowing how thin it is. He treasures the light, precisely because he has seen how much dark surrounds it. That is, I think, the deepest thing this single sentence has to teach us. We are all of us small bright creatures living on the thin surface of a world whose depths we cannot fully know. There are nameless things beneath every one of us, the deep truths, the old dreads, the indifferent vastness of time and death. We cannot fight them. We cannot fully understand them. We cannot make them care about us. But we can do what Gandalf did. We can know they are there and choose the day anyway. We can carry the weight of the deep and still love the light. We can stand on the thin, bright surface of our brief lives with all that dark below us and decide that the surface is worth everything. Worth fighting for, worth loving, worth treasuring with our whole hearts for exactly as long as we get to stand on it. The nameless things gnaw beneath us all. And the only answer, the only true and human and worthy answer, is to live and love and treasure the day, with the dark fully known and the light fully chosen. That is what Gandalf did. That is what the whole story is, finally, about, and it is what we are all doing. Every day, whether we know it or not, living our bright, brief lives on the thin, warm surface, above the deep, cold dark, choosing the day. Part 33. The Mithril Connection. Let me take you back down again, because there is a thread here I have not yet fully pulled, and it leads somewhere strange. It is about Mithril, and about why the dwarves were digging where they were digging, and what that tells us about the layers of the deep. Mithril, true silver. Moria silver. The most precious substance in Middle-earth, found nowhere else in the world but in the deep places beneath the misty mountains. The dwarves of Khazad-diem grew rich beyond imagining on it, and they hungered for it, and that hunger drove them to dig deeper and deeper into the roots of the mountains. And it was that digging, that endless downward delving in pursuit of Mithril, that broke into the Balrog's resting place and doomed the kingdom. Now here is something worth sitting with. Where does Mithril come from? Where, in the deep layers of the world, is it found? The answer is down. Deep down. The Mithril veins ran downward, into the roots of the mountains, deeper and deeper, and the dwarves followed them down, because the deeper they dug, the more they found. The Mithril was leading them down toward the deep places, down toward the Balrog, and beyond the Balrog, down toward the layers where the nameless things gnaw. There is something almost like a trap in this, when you look at it the right way. The most precious substance in the world, the thing the dwarves desired above all else, was found in the deep, and pursuing it drew them down, ever down, toward the oldest horrors in the world. It is as if the deep places baited the surface dwellers with treasure, drawing them down with the promise of wealth, leading them step by step toward the dark. The dwarves thought they were digging toward riches. They were digging toward the Balrog, and had the Balrog not stopped them, they would have kept digging toward worse. I am not saying the Mithril was placed there deliberately, as bait, by some intelligence of the deep. The text does not support that, and I do not want to invent lore that is not there. But I am pointing at the shape of the thing, the way the geography of the deep is arranged, so that the surface world's greed leads it downward, toward the dark, toward the things that wait below. The treasure is in the deep, and the deep is where the nameless things are. And to reach for the one is to dig toward the other. That is the shape of the warning that the fall of Khazad-diem encodes, that the hunger for the deep world's treasures will, in the end, draw you down to the deep world's horrors. Dig too greedily and too deep, and you find first the Balrog, and below the Balrog, in the dark you never reached, the things that even the Balrog feared. Part 34. The Cold Water and the First Darkness. I want to dwell one more time on the image of that subterranean sea, the deep, cold, dark water where Gandalf fought and fell and found the Nameless Things. Because I think the water itself is significant in a way that connects to the oldest layers of Tolkien's cosmology. Water in Tolkien's mythology is ancient and deep and tied to the very beginning of things. One of the great Valar, Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, was the most attuned to the original music, the one who understood Ilúvatar's themes most deeply, the one whose domain, the seas and rivers and all waters of the world, carried the memory of the creation more faithfully than any other element. Water remembers. Water is old. The deep waters of the world are among the most ancient things in it, and the deepest waters of all, the lightless seas in the roots of the mountains, the water that Gandalf fell into, those waters have been there since the shaping of the world, untouched, unchanged, in the absolute dark. They are, in a sense, a remnant of the first state of things, the dark waters that existed in the deep before light was ever made. Remember that in Tolkien's creation, the world existed in darkness before the Valar made the lamps, before the two trees, before the sun and moon. There was an age of the world in darkness, the world fully shaped, the seas and mountains made, but no light yet to shine on them. The deep waters in the roots of the mountains are a surviving piece of that first dark age. They have never known light, because they were sealed in the deep before light was ever made, and the light, when it finally came, never reached them. So when Gandalf falls into that water, he is falling into the first darkness, the original dark, the dark from before the lamps, preserved in the deep roots of the world. And the things that live in that water, the nameless things that gnaw there, they are creatures of that first dark. They have never known light, because they predate light. They were there in the dark before the dark was ever broken, and they have remained in the dark ever since. While above them the world was lit, and the ages turned, and the whole bright history of Middle-earth played out under a sun they have never seen and never will. This is, I think, the truest sense in which they are older than Sauron. Sauron, for all his antiquity, is a creature of the lit world. He came into his power in the ages of light. He built his works under the sun and the stars. His whole career as a Dark Lord takes place in the world after light. But the nameless things in the deep water are older than light itself. They belong to the first dark, the original darkness of the world before the lamps were raised. They are, quite literally, before everything we think of as the world, before the sun, before the moon, before the light that defines every age we know. They are the dark that was there first. And they are still there, in the deep water, in the roots of the mountains, exactly as they have always been, since before there was any light to drive them away. Part 35. The Comfort of the Unknown. I have spent a great deal of this telling dwelling on the horror of the nameless things, the dread, the indifference, the cold scale of them. And that horror is real, and it is the heart of why they fascinate us. But I want to offer you now a different way of holding all of this, because I think there is something in the nameless things that is not only frightening. There is something, strangely, that is almost comforting, and I think it is worth finding. Here is the comfort. The nameless things tell us that the world is bigger than the war. Think about how it feels to be inside the Lord of the Rings, inside the War of the Ring, the great struggle that consumes everything, where the fate of all the world hangs on a knife's edge, where every heart is bent toward the single overwhelming question of whether the darkness will win. It is a story of total stakes. Everything matters. Everything is at risk. The whole world will be saved or lost, depending on what a few small people do. And then Gandalf mentions the Nameless Things, and suddenly the frame cracks open, and we see past the edge of the war into something larger. We see that beneath the entire struggle, the deep world goes on, ancient and indifferent, untouched by Sauron and unconcerned with the ring. And yes, that is frightening. It makes our struggle small. But it is also, in a strange way, a relief. Because it means the war is not, in fact, the whole of everything. It means there is a world that does not depend on the outcome. It means that whatever happens on the surface, however the great struggle ends, the deep world will still be there, gnawing, ancient, enduring. The world is older and larger and more durable than any single war, even the war for everything. There is a humility in this that is healthy, even healing. We are not the center of the world. Our struggles, however total they feel, are taking place on the thin surface of something vast and old that does not depend on us. And that is frightening, yes, but it is also freeing. Because it means we do not have to carry the entire weight of existence on our small shoulders. The world is bigger than us. The world will endure things we cannot imagine. The deep places will go on, with or without us, ancient and patient and enduring, long after our brief bright struggles are over. The nameless things put us in our place. And our place, it turns out, is small, but it is also free. Free to live our brief lives fully, without the crushing burden of believing that everything depends on us. The deep world does not need us. It will go on. And that means we are free to simply be what we are, small bright creatures, living and loving on the surface, for our brief allotted time, in a world so much larger and older than ourselves that our failures cannot break it and our struggles cannot exhaust it. There is rest in that, if you can find it. The rest of knowing that you are small, and that the world is large, and that it is not, after all, entirely up to you. Part 36. The One Who Sailed Away. When Gandalf's work in Middle-earth was finally done, when the ring was destroyed, and Sauron was thrown down, and the king had returned, and the long age of struggle was over, Gandalf went to the Grey Havens, and he boarded a white ship, and he sailed west, out of Middle-earth, into the true west, the undying lands, leaving the world behind forever. And he took the knowledge of the nameless things with him. Think about that. The one being who descended into the deep and came back, the one who swam in the dark water and felt whatever was there, the one who carried the knowledge of what gnaws at the roots of the world, he left. He sailed away over the sea and never returned. And he never told. Not Aragorn, not the hobbits, not anyone. Whatever he learned in the deep, whatever he understood about the nameless things, went with him across the sea and out of the story forever. The knowledge left the world when he left it. So the nameless things remain in the deep, beneath a Middle Earth that no longer has anyone in it who has seen them. The fourth age begins, the age of men. The age after the elves and the wizards and the old powers have faded or departed. And in that new age, the surface world has forgotten the deep entirely. There is no one left who knows. There is no Gandalf to remember the dark water. There is no wise voice to say, quietly, that there are older things than Sauron beneath the world. The knowledge has sailed away into the west, and the surface world goes on in ignorance, building its new age. while beneath it, unknown, unremembered, unsuspected, the nameless things gnaw on exactly as they always have. There is something almost unbearably lonely in that image. The deep things, gnawing in the dark, now truly unknown. Not just unnamed, but unremembered, with the last witness gone over the sea. And the surface world above them, busy with its bright new age, having forgotten that the deep was ever there. The two worlds, more separate than ever, the thread of knowledge that briefly connected them, carried away on a white ship into the sunset. And maybe that is right. Maybe that is how it should be. Maybe the kindest thing, the thing Gandalf intended, was for the knowledge to leave with him. For the surface world to be free, at last, of even the memory of the deep. To live in the bright new age without the shadow of the nameless things hanging over it. Gandalf carried the burden out of the world when he left. He took the darkening knowledge away across the sea, so that the world he left behind could have its day, undarkened at last. It was his final gift, perhaps, to carry the deepest dread out of Middle-earth entirely, and leave behind only the light. Part 37. What we are really afraid of. Let us be honest with ourselves, finally, about why this single sentence has such power. Why does the idea of the nameless things reach into us the way it does? Why, of all the monsters and horrors in all of fantasy, do these unseen, undescribed, unexplained things in the deep frighten us more than creatures we can actually see? Because they are a mirror for the thing we are most afraid of and least able to face. They are a mirror for the indifference of reality itself. The deepest human fear is not the fear of being hurt, or even the fear of dying. The deepest human fear, I think, is the fear of not mattering. The fear that the universe does not know we are here. The fear that all our love and struggle and meaning is happening on a tiny stage, beneath the notice of a cosmos so vast and old and indifferent that our entire existence, the whole human story, every life that has ever been lived, is less than nothing to it. The fear that we are small and brief and alone in a reality that does not see us and does not care. The nameless things are that fear, given a shape, or rather, given the refusal of a shape, which is more honest. They are the parts of reality that do not see us. They are old beyond our comprehension, vast beyond our imagining, and utterly indifferent to everything we are and everything we do. They gnaw at the foundations of our world without even knowing we exist. And there is nothing we can do about it. We cannot make them see us. We cannot make them care. We cannot fight them, or befriend them, or understand them. They simply are, beneath us, ancient and indifferent, exactly as the cold, vast universe is ancient and indifferent beneath all our small, warm human lives. This is why they frighten us more than any visible monster. A monster, however terrible, is engaged with us. It wants to eat us, or rule us, or destroy us, and in wanting something from us, it confirms that we matter, that we are worth its attention. The nameless things confirm the opposite. They confirm that we can be utterly beneath the notice of the oldest and greatest things in existence. They confirm our smallness, our irrelevance, our cosmic loneliness. And that is the fear that lives at the very bottom of the human heart, deeper than the fear of death, deeper than the fear of pain. The fear of not mattering at all. But here, and this is the last turn, the one I most want to leave you with, here is where Tolkien does something quietly magnificent, because his answer to that fear is not to deny it. He does not pretend the nameless things are not there. He does not pretend we matter to the cosmos. Instead, he shows us Gandalf, who has seen the indifferent deep, who knows how small the surface world is, who has felt the full weight of the cosmic indifference, and who chooses, anyway, to love the small warm world and to give everything for it. Gandalf's answer to the indifference of the deep is not to despair. It is to love the surface more fiercely, precisely, because it is small and brief and unprotected. We may not matter to the nameless things, but we matter to each other. And that, Tolkien insists, is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. Part 38. The Last Layer. We have descended, in this telling, through every layer of the deep. We have gone down past the surface, past the mines, past Moria, past the Balrog's resting place, into the dark water and the roots of the mountains, where the nameless things gnaw. We have considered what they might be: spirits of the discord, sunken Maiar, fragments of the void, creatures of the first dark before light. We have looked at why Sauron cannot see them, why the Balrog feared them, why Gandalf would not speak of them. We have gone as deep as the law allows, and a little deeper into the places where we can only wonder. And now I want to name the last layer, the deepest truth of all, the thing that lies beneath even the nameless things. It is this: we will never know. That is the bottom. That is the flaw of this entire mystery, and it is a flaw that Tolkien built deliberately and sealed deliberately and never once tried to open. We will never know what the nameless things are. Not because the information has been lost, but because it was never given. Because the one who created them chose, with full intention and complete artistry, to leave them unknown. The mystery is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a door that was locked on purpose, and the key was never made. And I want to suggest to you that this final unknowability is not a frustration, but a gift. Because a world in which everything can be known is a small world. A world in which every door can be opened, every mystery solved, every dark place lit, is a world that has no depth, no awe, no genuine encounter with the vast and the ancient and the unknowable. Tolkien gave us, in the Nameless Things, a permanent and unsolvable mystery, a place in his world that will never be mapped, never be explained, never be brought up into the light. And in doing so, he gave us something that almost no other fantasy world has: a true bottom, a real deep, a place where knowledge genuinely ends and wonder genuinely begins. Every time someone reads that sentence, far below the deepest delving of the dwarves, the world is gnawed by nameless things. They stand at the edge of that true deep, and they feel the cold air rising, and they wonder, and they will never know, and that not knowing connects them to every other reader who has ever stood at that same edge, across 70 years and counting, all of them peering down into the same dark, all of them feeling the same wonder and the same dread, all of them held in the same beautiful, permanent, deliberate mystery. The nameless things belong to all of us, precisely because they belong to no explanation. They are the shared dark at the bottom of the world we all love. Part 39. The Final Descent. I want to take you down one last time, not into theory now, but into the thing itself. Close your eyes, if you are somewhere you can. Let me take you all the way down. Start on the surface. The green grass of the Shire, the sun warm on your face, the smell of growing things. This is the world we know. This is the world of the story, of hobbits and their gardens, of the bright, brief lives we follow through the whole great tale. Now go down. Into the earth. Past the roots of the grass, past the soil, into the stone. Down through the layers of rock, past the places where men have dug their small mines, down into the dark. The light fails, the warmth fades, You are in the realm of stone now, the silent dark of the deep earth. Keep going. Down past the upper tunnels, into the great halls of Moria, vast, echoing, empty now, the bones of the Dwarves' lost kingdom. Down the endless stairs, past the deep chambers, past the broken bridge where Gandalf fell. This is deep. This is deeper than almost anyone ever goes. But it is not the bottom. It is not even close. Keep going down. Past the Balrog's old resting place, the lair where Durin's Bane slept for 1,000 years. Down past that, into darkness that no dwarf ever dug, that no map records, that no light has ever touched. The pressure of the stone above you is unimaginable now. The silence is total. You are far below the living earth. And now you reach the water. Cold, black, still, the deep sea and the roots of the mountains, the first darkness. The water that was sealed in the deep before light was ever made. And you are in it now, in the lightless water, in the absolute dark, in the deepest place in all the world. And you are not alone. Something moves in the water with you. Something old. Something that has been here since before the sun. Something that does not see you, does not know you, does not care that you have come. Something that is simply here, as it has always been here, gnawing at the world in the dark, patient and ancient and utterly indifferent to your small, bright, trembling presence. You cannot see it. You will never see it. But you can feel it, the cold weight of its age, the vast, slow indifference of it. The sense of something so old and so deep that your entire world, your entire history, your entire self is less than a single moment to it. This is the bottom. This is what Gandalf felt in the dark water. This is what he would not describe. This is the nameless thing. And now, come back up. Rise back through the dark water, up past the Balrog's lair, up through the halls of Moria, up through the stone, up through the soil, back into the light, back to the green grass and the warm sun, and the bright, brief world of the surface. Open your eyes. You are back. You are safe. The day is bright. But you know now what is down there. You have felt it. And you understand now why Gandalf would not speak of it, and why, having felt it, he chose the day anyway. Part 40. Why this mystery endures. We are near the end now, and I want to ask one final question. Of all the unsolved mysteries in Tolkien, and there are many, why is this the one that endures? Why do the nameless things of all the loose threads and open questions hold us so completely, decade after decade? I think it is because this mystery is perfectly built. It has exactly the right amount of information and exactly the right amount of darkness. Too little information, and there would be nothing to grip, just a vague sense of something undefined. Too much, and the mystery would collapse into lore, into a solvable puzzle, into just another monster. But Tolkien gave us precisely the right amount, enough to make the nameless things real, vivid, present, the deep water, the gnawing, the age, the fear even of the Balrog, the silence of Gandalf, and not one word more. He gave us the exact dose of knowledge that maximizes wonder, a master's dose, a perfect calibration of the known and the unknown. And it endures because it is true, not literally true, but true to something real in the structure of existence and the structure of the human heart. The nameless things are true the way the best myths are true. They give shape to a real thing, the deep, ancient, indifferent vastness beneath all our bright, brief lives, and they give that real thing a form we can hold and feel and return to. When we contemplate the nameless things, we are really contemplating our own smallness, our own brevity, the deep time and deep dark that surrounds us all. And we are doing it safely, through the lens of a story, in a way that lets us feel the awe and the dread without being destroyed by them. That is what myth is for. That is what it has always been for. And the Nameless Things are myth working at the very highest level, taking the deepest and most unbearable truth and making it into something we can hold in our minds, and even, strangely, love it endures finally, because it trusts us. Tolkien trusted his readers to do the work, to feel the depth, to fill the dark, to bring their own dread and their own wonder to the empty space he left. He did not condescend to us by explaining. He did not flatter us by resolving. He simply opened the door at the bottom of the world, let us feel the cold air, and trusted us to understand why he closed it again. And we did understand. Across 70 years and millions of readers, we understood. We felt the cold air, and we stood at the edge of the deep, and we knew, without being told, that some things are better left in the dark. That is a rare and beautiful trust between a writer and his readers. And it is why, long after most fantasy monsters have been forgotten, the nameless things still gnaw at the bottom of our imagination. Exactly where Tolkien left them, exactly as he intended. Forever unnamed and forever unforgettable. Part 41. The Other Deep Places. Before we close, I want to widen the map. Because the Misty Mountains are not the only place in Middle-earth where the deep dark reaches up, and the nameless things beneath Moria may not be the only ancient horrors gnawing at the roots of the world. Tolkien scattered hints of deep dark throughout his legendarium, and when you gather them together, a pattern emerges, a sense that the whole world rests on a foundation of unmapped and ancient dread. Consider the paths of the dead, the haunted road beneath the mountains that Aragorn takes, the passage through the dark under the Dwymorberg, where the dead men of Dunharrow wait in their oath-breaking curse. That is a deep place, a dark place, a place of ancient dread, though its horror is of a different kind, the horror of the unquiet dead rather than the nameless living. But it tells us that the mountains of Middle-earth are riddled with dark passages, haunted deeps, places where the surface world gives way to something older and stranger. Consider the tunnels of Shelob, Torech Ungol, the lair beneath the pass into Mordor, where the great spider has woven her darkness for centuries. Shelob, as we discussed, is the last child of Ungoliant, that primordial horror from the dawn of the world. Her tunnels are deep and old and reeking with ancient evil. And though Shelob herself is named and known, her presence in those deep tunnels is another instance of the pattern, the ancient thing in the deep dark, older than the kingdoms around it, lurking beneath the paths that the surface dwellers must travel. Consider even the deep places beneath Angband and Utumno, the great fortresses of Morgoth in the ancient days, dug down into the roots of the earth in the far north, with dungeons and pits and tunnels going down into depths that even the besieging armies of the Valar never fully cleansed. When Morgoth's fortresses were thrown down, what happened to the deepest pits? The texts hint that not everything was found, not everything was destroyed, that in the deep places beneath the ruins of the Dark Lord's strongholds, things might have survived, hidden, waiting, gnawing. The point of gathering all these is to show you that the nameless things beneath Moria are not an isolated oddity. They are the clearest and most explicit expression of something that runs all through Tolkien's world. A deep substrate of ancient dark, a foundation of unmapped horror, beneath the entire bright surface of Middle-earth. The world we know, the world of the stories, is a thin-lit layer over a vast, dark deep, and that deep is everywhere, beneath every mountain, beneath every kingdom, beneath every green and pleasant land. The nameless things are simply the place where Tolkien let us feel that most directly. But they are not alone. The whole world rests on the deep dark. We just do not usually look down. Part 42. The music that made them. I want to return one final time to the very beginning, to the music, because I think the deepest answer to our question may lie there, and I want to draw it out as clearly as I can. Everything in Arda came from the music of the Aina. Everything, the mountains, the seas, the light, the darkness, the good and the evil, the harmony and the discord. All of it was sung, all of it was part of the great music that Ilúvatar's children made before the world began. And Ilúvatar said something extraordinary at the end of that music, when Melkor's discord had risen and clashed against the themes again and again. He said to Melkor that no theme could be played that did not have its uttermost source in Ilúvatar himself, and that no one could alter the music in spite of him. He said that even Melkor's discord, even the rebellion, even the marring, all of it would be revealed in the end to have been part of the greater music, to have contributed to a glory greater than any that could have been achieved without it. What this means is profound, and it touches the nameless things directly. Everything in the deep, every horror, every gnawing thing, every fragment of discord that sank into the roots of the world, all of it, even it, came ultimately from the music. Even the nameless things, whatever they are, however dark and indifferent and terrible, are part of the song that Ilúvatar set in motion. They are not outside his creation. Not truly. Not finally. They are a part of it that we cannot understand. A deep and dissonant strain in the great music. A darkness woven into the foundation of a world that was nonetheless sung into being by a creator who said that all of it, even the discord, would be revealed in the end to have served a purpose beyond our understanding. This does not make the nameless things less frightening, but it does place them, finally, within a frame of meaning, even if that meaning is one we cannot see. They are part of the music. They are part of the song. Their gnawing, their darkness, their terrible ancient indifference, all of it is, somehow, in some way we cannot grasp from where we stand, part of a greater harmony that we are too small and too close to hear. Ilúvatar hears it. The Creator hears the whole music, including the deep dark strains that we can only feel as dread. And he has promised that in the end, when the music is played in full, in the great consummation of all things that Tolkien hinted at but never described, the second music, greater than the first, in which all the children of Ilúvatar will sing together. In that final song, even the nameless things will be revealed to have had their place, their purpose, their note in the great chord of everything. We cannot hear it. We are too small, too brief, too near the surface. But it is there. The nameless things gnaw in the deep, and it sounds to us like dread, like indifference, like the cold, dark bottom of the world. But to the one who made the music, it may sound like something else entirely. A deep note, a bass strain, a darkness that the light needs in order to be light. We will never know from here. But we can hold the possibility, like a small warm coal in the dark, that even the deepest dark, even the nameless things, even the gnawing at the roots of the world, is part of a song too vast for us to hear, and that the song, in the end, is good. Part 43. What Gandalf chose. I keep returning to Gandalf, because in the end this whole mystery comes down to a choice that he made, and I think that choice is the most important thing in it. Gandalf saw the nameless things, or felt them, sensed them, came as close to knowing them as any being in the story ever did. He was in the deep water with them, and when he came back, he made a choice he could have made differently. He chose not to speak of them. He chose to carry the knowledge alone. He chose to let his friends have the bright day, undarkened, and later. When his work was done, he chose to carry that knowledge out of the world entirely, across the sea into the west, so that the world he left behind would be free even of the memory. Every part of that is a choice. He could have told them. He could have warned the world, raised the alarm, made the nameless things into a known dread that the surface world had to reckon with. He could have spent the rest of his time in Middle-earth obsessed with the deep, trying to understand it, trying to map it, trying to fight it. He did none of those things. He chose instead to know the dark and to choose the light, to carry the weight and protect the day, to let the deep stay deep and the surface stay bright, and to give everything he had to the small, brief struggle of the surface world, knowing all the while what lay beneath it. This is, I think, the model of wisdom that Tolkien is offering us through this whole strange and frightening mystery. Not the wisdom of knowing everything, not the wisdom of fighting every darkness, but the wisdom of knowing what to look at and what to leave in the dark. The wisdom of carrying the unbearable knowledge so that others do not have to. The wisdom of choosing, deliberately and with full awareness, to love and protect the bright, brief surface of life, precisely because you know how thin it is and how deep the dark beneath it goes. We cannot all be Gandalf. We cannot descend into the literal deep and come back changed. But we can learn his choice. We can learn to carry the deep knowledge, the knowledge of our own mortality, the knowledge of time's vastness, the knowledge of the cold, indifferent depths beneath every life, without letting it darken every day. We can learn to know the dark and choose the light. To say, as he said, "I will not speak of that now," because it would only darken the day, not out of denial, but out of love, out of the deep, wise understanding that the day is precious and brief and worth protecting, and that part of protecting it is choosing sometimes to leave the deep things in the deep. That is what Gandalf chose. And it is, I think, the wisest choice in the whole story. Wiser than any battle, any strategy, any feat of power. The quiet choice to know the worst and love the world anyway. To carry the dark and give the light. To stand on the thin, bright surface with all that ancient dread below and choose freely, knowingly, with your whole heart to treasure the day. Part 44. The door at the bottom of the world. So here we are, at the end of our descent. We have gone as deep as it is possible to go, down past the surface, past the mines, past Moria, past the Balrog, into the dark water and the roots of the mountains, to the very bottom of the world, where the nameless things gnaw in the first darkness. And we have found at the bottom exactly what Tolkien wanted us to find: a locked door, and the cold air rising from behind it, and the permanent, deliberate, beautiful mystery of what lies beyond. We do not get to open that door. That is the whole point. Tolkien built it to stay closed. He gave us the sentence, and the dread and the wonder, and then he sealed the door and sailed his wizard away over the sea with the only key. And what he left us with is not an answer, but an experience. The experience of standing at the edge of the truly unknown, feeling the deep dark below, and being changed by the feeling. Because you are changed, a little, by contemplating the nameless things. You cannot really sit with this mystery, with the deep water, the gnawing, the things older than Sauron, the indifference, the vast cold scale of it, without coming away slightly altered. The world feels a little older, a little deeper, a little stranger. The ground beneath your feet feels a little less solid, a little more like the thin, bright lid of something vast and dark and ancient. And the daylight, when you come back up to it, feels a little more precious, a little warmer, a little more worth treasuring, precisely because you have felt, however briefly, the depth of the dark that surrounds it. That is what the great mysteries do. They do not give us answers. They give us the experience of awe, the experience of standing at the edge of the unknown and feeling, in our small, brief, mortal selves, the vastness of what we do not and cannot know. And that experience is not a diminishment. It is an enlargement. It makes us bigger by making us feel our smallness truly. It deepens us by letting us touch the deep. We come back up from the bottom of the world, not crushed but expanded, not diminished but deepened, carrying within us now a sense of the true scale of things, and a new and fiercer love for the bright, brief surface where our lives are lived. The door at the bottom of the world stays closed. The nameless things gnaw on, beneath everything, ancient and indifferent and unknown. And we live our lives on the surface, in the light, in the brief warm day, and we carry now the knowledge of the deep, and we choose, as Gandalf chose, the light anyway. That is the gift of this mystery. Not an answer, a deepening, a door we will never open, and the awe of standing before it, and the love of the light that the dark makes precious. That is what waits at the bottom of the world. That is what Tolkien left for us there. And it is, I think, one of the greatest and most generous gifts that any storyteller has ever given. Part 45. The Things That Have No Name. Let me leave you, finally, where we began, with the silence. With the wise old wizard, sitting in the green forest with his friends, having come back from death and the deep, choosing not to speak of what he found there, choosing to let the day stay bright, choosing the light. The nameless things have no name, because a name is a kind of capture. To name a thing is to know it, to hold it, to bring it up into the shared light of language, where it can be examined and understood and ultimately mastered. We name the things we can comprehend. We name the things that belong to our world. And the nameless things do not belong to our world, not the bright surface world of names and knowledge and meaning. They belong to the deep, to the dark, to the ancient, unmapped places that precede and underlie and outlast everything we can name. They have no name, because they cannot be captured, cannot be known, cannot be brought up into the light. They are the part of reality that stays forever beyond our words. And there is something almost holy in that. We live in an age that wants to name everything, explain everything, map everything, bring everything up into the light of knowledge and hold it there. And there is great good in that. Knowledge is a gift, understanding is a treasure. But there is also a loss. When everything is named, there is a flattening, a diminishment, a draining away of the awe that comes from standing before the genuinely unknown. The nameless things are Tolkien's gift against that flattening. They are a permanent reminder that some things cannot and should not be named, that the world is deeper than our knowledge, older than our understanding, vaster than our maps, that there is, and always will be, a dark at the bottom of things that we cannot illuminate, and that this dark is not a failure of our knowledge, but a feature of the world, a necessary deep, a true bottom, a place where wonder lives precisely because knowledge cannot reach it. So the next time you read that sentence, far below the deepest delving of the dwarves, the world is gnawed by nameless things, I hope you will feel what Tolkien wanted you to feel. The cold air rising, the vast dark below, the wonder and the dread of the truly unknown. And I hope you will understand, as Gandalf understood, why some things are better left unnamed, and why the wisest response to the deepest dark is not to fight it or explain it, or even to fear it, but simply to know that it is there, and then to turn, deliberately, back toward the light, toward the green grass and the warm sun and the company of those we love, and to treasure the bright brief day all the more fiercely for the dark that lies beneath it. The nameless things gnaw in the deep. They always have. They always will. And we live our lives above them, in the light, for our brief allotted time, small and bright and brave and free. That is the whole of it. That is the story beneath the story, the truth at the bottom of the world. There are nameless things in the deep, and there is light on the surface, and the wisest among us are the ones who know both, and choose the light. Thank you for coming down into the dark with me. It is good now to climb back up into the light together. The day is bright. The grass is green. And the deep, for now, is far below. And perhaps that is the final gift of the nameless things, that they send us back to the surface, loving it more. We went down into the dark, and we felt the cold, and we stood at the edge of the oldest mystery in the world, and now, climbing back up, the ordinary light feels extraordinary. The warmth of the sun, the green of the grass, the faces of the people we love, all of it made more precious by the dark we have glimpsed beneath it. That is what the deep gives back to those who visit it and return. Not despair, but a fiercer love of the light. Gandalf knew that. It is why he came back from the bottom of the world and gave everything for the bright, brief surface of it. And it is, I think, the truest thing this whole strange mystery has to teach us, that the dark is real and deep and old beyond our knowing, and that the only answer worth giving is to climb back into the light and love it with our whole hearts for as long as we are given to stand in it. Stay well, and mind the deep places.